Guys ready to rock and roll?
It's good. We actually got
Guys ready?
Springfield.
Good evening and welcome to the March 17, 2025 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Scott Leugitz and I am the chairman of the Zoning Board. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of the special meeting has been provided to a newspaper record, has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed on the city's YouTube page, also broadcast on Summit's government channel, which is Comcast Channel 34 and Verizon Channel 30. A transcript of this meeting is also being taken using video and audio, so we need all speakers to utilize one of the microphones in the room. Please note that the fire exits are to my right, your left, and the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter. Nicole, could you please call the roll of members?
Yes. Mr. Karen,
Here.
Mr. Millay,
Here.
Mr. Nelson,
Here.
Mr. Steiner is excused, Mr. Yuko,
Here.
Vice Chair Zahn is not in at the moment, but we expect her shortly. Ms. Chifo? Here. Mr. Feskins?
Here.
Mr. Chanchuli?
Here.
Mr. Neering?
Here.
Chairman Lucas?
Here.
You have a quorum, you may proceed.
Thank you, Nicole. Andy Ball is the zoning board's attorney. Mr. Ball advises the board members on matters of law, is the key interface with the applicant's attorney. Mr. Ball does not vote on the applications. Nicole Cotilla is a city employee and is acting as the zoning board's secretary. Our board secretary works with the applicants on preparing their applications, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. The board secretary also does not vote on these applications. Also present are experts who are hired annually by the board to provide input. Tonight, we have Marie Raffet from Collier's Engineering. Also present is Ed Snikes from Burgess Associates and is our board planner. These experts are seated at the table to the right of the board, the public's left. They also do not vote on these applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearings tonight, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Before we enter executive session to vote on the application, you will be advised as how many votes are required. Each case will begin with the applicants or their attorney giving an overview of the application process to date and the variances that are required. We then hear from any additional expert witnesses the applicant may have to explain the application and why the variances are needed. The board experts, followed by the board members, may then ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and their expert witnesses. Due to recent cases running excessively long, we strongly encourage applicants and their experts to give brief and concise testimony so we may get to as many cases as possible in a given evening. Once the board members and the board professionals have completed their questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think about this case. That opportunity comes at the end of the hearing. Please be careful as to how you phrase your questions. They should not be preceded with a statement about the case, but should be a direct question to the witness. Also, before you ask your questions, please clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address. It is important that our court reporter be able to keep a clear and accurate public record. After all witnesses have been heard, members of the audience have their second opportunity to speak, and at that time, you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed and we enter into executive session. This is where the board members discuss the case and then vote. You'll be able to listen to our executive session, but you will not normally be able to participate in our discussion. I will ask each applicant and their attorney, if present, to come up and give a brief synopsis of their anticipated testimony tonight, including the number of witnesses, whether or not they can finish their presentation within 30 minutes. I think we know that's not going to happen tonight. This evening, we're going to begin with 27 Edgar.
Good evening, Chairman. James First, on behalf of the applicant, 27 Edgar LLC. We were here 2 weeks ago, gave our second presentation on that application, and we're here tonight to finalize that, or we thought we would. I had preserved a moment for a closing argument. In the interim of the 2 weeks, based on some discussion that we had with some of the board members at the last meeting, some information we received from the planner, we went back and we looked at our application, and we believe that we can make some adjustments to the application and perhaps not have to appear before the board, perhaps have an of-right plan that we could then put before the building department and save this body the time that will be required to rule and to deliberate on our application. Based on those discussions I've had with my professionals and with my client, we're respectfully requesting that the matter be adjourned to some later date so that we can work with the building department, hopefully come up with a plan that is variance-free, in which case this application could be withdrawn, but we would like it to be carried to some future meeting in case we do need to come back here if there's something minor or something that we just don't see in our analysis as of today. So respectfully, Mr. Chairman, requesting an adjournment on behalf of my client, consenting to an extension of the time for the board to rule on it, and requesting that no further notice be required.
Okay. What is the next available date we have? July 21st. July.
I was told it was July. That's acceptable, yes.
Okay, great.
So then I know you mentioned waiving the time, but waiving the time until July 21st?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. And then the board, obviously, whether or not you want to see notice, I know it is a big gap in time, a potentially significant change in the plans that you're contemplating, but up to the board.
I think renotice.
Fair enough. If that's your pleasure, it's fine.
So we will be looking then for a motion to carry with notice until July 21st, you said? Okay.
So moved, carried with notice.
Second?
Nicole, can you call? Thank you. Sorry.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Malay?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Steiner? Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Vice Chair Zahn?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Feskins?
I have to abstain from this.
Mr. Tanchuli?
Yes.
Mr. Neering?
Yes.
Chairman Loikis?
Yes. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wish you an early evening with no controversy.
Thank you so much. Before we start the case and the reason why everyone's here, I'm going to just put out right now that we're going to give you approximately 3 hours to go through your testimony, but understand that we're going to try and wrap things up by 10:30 tonight. It's probably not going to finish the case, so then we can discuss next steps at that point. Okay. So with that, can I have a representative for 695 Springfield Avenue, please?
That would be me, Mr. Chairman. Roger Maynor from the firm of Lindenberry, McCormick, Estabrook, and Cooper, and we represent Beacon Unitarian. We have 6 witnesses,
Okay.
so you're quite correct. We're not going to, we'll get as far as we can, but we're
Excellent.
obviously not going to be able to finish tonight,
Okay.
so. As I said, this is the application of Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Summit. It's 695 Springfield Avenue, Block 1702, Lot 47. The property is in the city's R15 zone. I think everyone here is familiar with it. It's the old Red Cross property on Springfield Avenue. It is surrounded on 3 sides by public lands, parkland, and the primary center, the former Wilson School behind it, for playing fields. There are the facility closest to it is actually the city's lighted paddleboard ball courts. Beacon's been in Summit since the early 1900s. It started in 1908, and it built the sanctuary that you're all familiar with at the corner of Waldron and Springfield in 1913. It was for a long time at 2 different locations there, and they had a school, when I first moved to Summit in 1978, a school-type structure up on Whitridge Avenue across from the end of Waldron that housed all the church's offices and religious education. They moved to one location where they are now with a project in the early 2000s, which involved creating a church hall underneath the existing church and a structure attached to it that housed the other church functions such as classrooms, offices, etc. But that facility really did not carry it far into the future. And there was an application before this board, those of you who were around at the dawn of COVID will recall doing that over Zoom, painfully over Zoom, to build a new sanctuary on the existing site because the church had acquired the Dangler Funeral Home. They sought to combine the whole property, build a new sanctuary. It had some 400 seats in it. And during the course of that application, this property, the Red Cross property, became available. You all remember there actually was a for sale sign in front of it. And the church looked at that and said, you know, we could build one facility that would house everything. We could get ourselves out of this location where we have literally 0 parking. We could create some parking. We're in a location that would be surrounded by public lands. It would just be a much better option for the church. So they put on hold and then withdrew the application for Waldron and started developing the plans that are in front of you tonight. The present proposal really addresses everything that the church has been trying to solve for a long, long time. It would be one modern sanctuary. It will have seating for 300 people. The seating's a little flexible, and actually the day-to-day setup is actually fewer than 300. It's 280-something, but there will be testimony on that. That is more than enough for the church to reach its goal of having one service every Sunday rather than 2, which they have now, because the sanctuary is too small. So now we have to have 2 services. The whole church community cannot come together in one service. And we have overlap parking now because people coming to one service are getting there before people are leaving the other service. So that will be eliminated, and it'll be much better for the church community to gather as one for one service on Sunday. And it'll be less impactful than the present situation, which has kind of 2 traffic peaks on every Sunday. We will just have one. It will enable the church to have some green space, which it does not have right now, and which you will hear about, is actually part of the exercise of the faith, that they really do use their green outdoor spaces to some extent in the teaching and practice of Unitarian Universalism, but you'll hear more about that from a clergy person. It also will give us 42 on-site parking spaces, which for everything but the peak on Sunday for an hour or 2 is more than enough for what the church otherwise does. I mean, there won't be any overflow parking really other than on Sunday morning, which I think is true of most churches in Summit. You know, few of them are lucky enough to be able to park all their attendees on Sunday on site. And it will also, as part of the plan, the church will have to sell its present property, both the office building and the existing sanctuary, because financially it can't keep one and build the other. It's not a large congregation, so that property would be sold. But that can't happen until we know whether, obviously, we're going to build a new sanctuary or not, so we can't do that until this process plays itself out. As I said, I think the site's really quite well suited for what the church is proposing. Churches are conditional uses in the residential zones in Summit. That means they're supposed to be there. It means they're permitted uses. Now, there are conditions under the ordinance which are supposed to be met. We don't meet some of those, and we'll talk about that. The main one being that the site is a little bit under 2 acres. It's about 1.66. But try to find a 2-acre site in Summit. You know, they're telling us to put affordable housing on the medians in streets. So we think from that standpoint, it does not abut anything that's really going to be impacted day in, day out by this, by the church. And churches are, compared to many other public-type uses or institutional-type uses, they're not hugely impactful. They're not like a school which has a couple traffic jams a day, 5 days a week, children playing outside and buzzers and noise and bells and so forth. They're really pretty low-key, except for Sunday morning when people come to worship. So they're not the most impactful type of institutional use you might have, as opposed to a school or a hospital or something along those lines. The church is also, and your attorney can tell you about this and your planner too, but church is what's called inherently beneficial use under the law in New Jersey. So that means that certain uses which are important publicly, and I would tell you that there's a gradation of inherently beneficial uses, but churches, which involve the exercise of a constitutional right, and a pretty darn precious one, are as high as it gets on that scale. They are deemed to be inherently beneficial. They benefit the entire community. And they're clearly, all of our houses of worship are part of the fabric of this community. So what that means under the law is that they are deemed to satisfy positive type criteria for variances. So they, especially with the D variances, we don't have to prove special reasons, or we really don't have to talk about site suitability. We really don't even have to talk about the conditional use variances. There's case law to the effect that we satisfy the positive criterion of those too. But the criteria under D3s are much lesser. They really have to do with, can the site take the burden of whatever the variance happens to be. So we have to bear that in mind when we're analyzing the church's presentation here. And then the negative criteria, again, because we're inherently beneficial for many of the variances, when we're looking at the negative criteria, that we don't do any substantial harm to the public good or the zone plan or the zoning ordinance, the board really has to look at a balancing test, which is under one of the famous cases. It's called SICA, S-I-C-A, and it has to really balance what the potential harm of granting the variances might be. It has to decide whether, if there is some harm, if they need to adopt some reasonable conditions to ameliorate that. And then if they can come up with, if they do that, whether on balance the conditions will be, there will be no substantial, and the word substantial is important, harm to the public good or zone plan or zoning ordinance. So there really is a different standard here because of the nature of the use involved. This is not a gas station or a bowling alley, thank goodness. So there are a number of variances. They're listed in the application. They're summarized again in your planner's memo, Burgess's memo. There's a variance for solar panels, which we're proposing over some of the parking areas. Solar panels are not permitted in the R zone, but this is not a residential use. And whether that's a D1 or a D3 is up to the board. I mean, I would submit that I think some solar panels are inherently beneficial too, maybe not as high a gradation of an inherently beneficial use as a church, but they certainly are beneficial these days. But however you analyze it, that's one of the variances. There are variances, D3 variances from our conditional use standards. Really the main one is the lot size. We're a bit undersized on the lot, and a lot of the other variances from those flow from the lot size. There are setbacks and buffers, and again, they're listed, and we'll go through them in detail in our presentation. There's a floor area ratio variance, which is very slight. And then there are C variances, parking, and then other things that, again, have to do with setbacks and buffers. And because of the nature of the use, there's some variances relating to the sign. The sign letters are slightly bigger than what's permitted, and it's a two-sided sign, which technically might be two signs. But again, most of these variances have to do with the nature of the use and the size of the lot. Okay, and again, there's a C variance for curb cut width, but again, this is not a residential driveway. We have to provide for people to get in and out. And finally, in terms of the standards, we do always have out there, there's the federal statute, RLUIPA. It is the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, it really states that a municipality or governmental body can't really limit or burden someone's exercise of religion, but through enforcement or application of land use regulations or decisions. So unless there's some compelling governmental interest at stake, well, and there's no less restrictive means of doing it, I don't think we'll get to that level, but that's always out there. And some indication of how the federal government feels about religious uses, I think. So that being said, I have 6 witnesses. There's Reverend Dr. Robin Tanner, who's one of the clergy people, will just tell you about how they operate, what they do, and why they need this facility. Louis Cherry, the architect. John Cody from Langen Engineering is a site engineer, civil engineer. Davis Dockweiler, who's a landscape architect, can talk about our landscape design. Betsy Dolan, who did the traffic and parking studies, professional engineer, and then Paul Phillips is our planner, who will wrap up everything. He will be the last witness. Obviously, we won't get to all those tonight, but that's the lineup. So,
Great.
do you all have any questions for me?
This time.
I do.
Oh,
I have one.
go ahead.
Is there someone who is, out of the list, I'm not clear, is there someone who's going to testify about the other events that will be taking place?
What
Or plan
other-
to take- Well, in the packet, it said that the property will be rented out for weddings and other events.
Well, the Reverend Tanner will tell you everything that's going to go on there. It's not rented out for weddings. I mean, people in the congregation get married in the church. So it's not a wedding venue. They unfortunately have funerals there too, but it's a typical church use. It's not there's no separate church hall. There's no place to have really things like receptions there. It's just the sanctuary.
Great. So Roger, why don't you call your first witness?
Okay, it's Reverend Tanner, and because of her, I'm going to ask her to sit next to me and
Understood.
testify.
Sure.
It's a little hobble these days.
All right. And when you're ready, if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Reverend Dr. Robin Tanner, Tanner.
Thank you.
Sorry, it took longer to get organized than it took you. Okay, so Reverend Tanner, could you just summarize for the board briefly your educational and professional experience?
I have a bachelor's in psychology and religion from the University of Rochester, and then I have a master's of divinity from Harvard Divinity School, and a doctorate in ministry, which is from the Pacific School of Religion.
And where have you served as a clergy person?
So I've been at Beacon for 8.5 years. Prior to that, I was at the Piedmont Church, which is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was for 6.5 years. And before that, I completed a year-long residency in hospital chaplaincy in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And since you've come to Beacon, what do you do on a daily basis? What are your duties?
That's the great mystery. A lot of people think I just show up on Sundays and say a few words for an hour or two. But along with our executive director, we form the lead ministry team, and so my specific portfolio areas, in addition to the worship services, include our outreach ministries, our pastoral care, supporting in our communications. I'm a partner with our board of trustees in making decisions for the well-being of the congregation.
And do you participate in the Interfaith Council?
Yes, I'm presently the president of the Summit Interfaith Council. I'll finish my term at the end of May.
Thank you. So is it fair to say you know everything that goes on at Beacon?
Yes.
All right, so I wonder if you could just tell the board very briefly again, just a basic explanation of what Unitarian Universalism is.
Sure. So a lot of people aren't as familiar with our faith. Unitarian Universalism comes from two historic progressive Christian denominations, Unitarians and Universalists, both of whom theologically date back within the first century of the Christian church in the United States. The denominations date back to the 18th and 19th centuries. In 1961, the Unitarians and the Universalists merged to become the Unitarian Universalist Association, of which our congregation is a member. Our denominational body, rather than being gathered around a creed, is gathered around 6 principles, or 6 values rather, that are all centered in love. Those values include justice, equity, pluralism, interdependence, generosity, transformation, again, centered in love. We're a continuing and evolving faith, which means that because we're not centered in a creed, rather we're centered in values. It's very much about how we live out our faith, about being in right relationship, and it means we have quite a bit of theological and spiritual diversity within our communities.
And could you just describe Beacon as it exists today for the board?
Sure.
Its size and what kinds of facilities you have?
So today we have 454 members and friends. Our friends are just about 100 in number of that 454. Friends tend to participate in one program. Many of them no longer live in New Jersey and only access our online ministry. But of our 354 members, the primary access point, as you've shared already, is our Sunday worship services, of which we have 2, 9:30 and 11 a.m. Across our 2 services right now, we have about 161 participants, and that's including our children's program, which occurs during the worship services.
And do you see any change in those numbers? Has that been affected by COVID, or do you expect that to change or grow?
So we did see a significant drop since COVID, and we have really not gone back to the membership that we had pre-COVID. We had quite a few members move, but I will say we have been tracking attendance for just about 40 years of solid records, and tracking membership for the same period, and we have fluctuated between about 400 and 520 members over the course of 4 decades. So it's been pretty steady, I would say.
And does the denomination, or do you see any growth in the near future? Are you predicting growth?
Unfortunately, we're a very small denomination, which is why many people are not well versed in who we are. Within the United States, we have about 1,000 congregations. The average congregational size is about 150. Part of it is, that we have this emphasis on relationship and one-to-one engagement. So we're not inclined, even organizationally, the way we make decisions or the way in which our programs run, to have really big, large congregations. It's kind of not in the DNA of the way in which we're structured. When you're looking at making decisions by consensus and through particular democratic processes, which is what we have, that does tend to limit the size of your communities.
So the plan that's before the board was not developed with the idea that it's going to cause or accommodate a huge amount of growth?
No, it's really out of a longing, as first and foremost, to be together in one service, to be able to gather together for a congregational meeting and for other major life events all at once, which is something that is impossible for us to do in our present sanctuary and has been impossible for some time.
And can you talk a little bit more detail about the drawbacks of the present sanctuary? I know it's not large enough seating-wise, but are there other issues or problems with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So while it is a lovely, intimate space that has incredible acoustics, the space includes really poor sight lines. We only have about 118 seats from which you can see and hear, and not all of those are accessible. Meaning if you come in a wheelchair, there are really only about 2 to 4 seats for wheelchairs and walkers that can be accommodated, which has been a significant challenge. In addition, the pulpit is only accessible via stairs, so we have had to decline speakers who had any kind of mobility needs, and there's not a simple resolution given the layout and the size of that sanctuary. I will say I'm much more attuned to that since my injury on Saturday than I was before. In addition, the entire structure of the sanctuary is really built around the reality of who we were in 1913, which, as I said, we are an evolving faith that has changed dramatically in how we worship. And it was structured at a time when the sermon was very long. It was the feature of the service, and all of your attention was directed toward that focal point. We now worship in the round. We now have services where we have multiple speakers who are featured, where we have music coming from different points in the service. We have earth-based rituals around solstice and equinox, and we cannot accommodate those within our sanctuary. We often get guidance and materials and opportunities to participate in programs from our denomination that aren't possible because of the physical structure of the sanctuary. In addition, it's a very turn of the 20th century Protestant-looking sanctuary, and when you have members who are theists and atheists, Buddhists and Hindu and Jewish, to come into a space that really reads as a Christian sanctuary architecturally is a challenge for many of our interfaith families.
I know you covered the size of how many families are members and so forth, and the services. Could you talk a little bit about the other programs and education that you currently run and you plan to run at the new site?
Absolutely. So I think we've also provided a program that we can
let's
give to
mark
you.
that. This would be our first marked exhibit. So this would be
A1.
I can pass these out.
Sure. Yeah, I have one. So our,
This is, excuse me one second.
Yep.
So this is, let me just show this to you. This is a summary you prepared of a typical week
Mhm.
at the church based on statistics that were gathered. So should I just pass them out to the whole board members?
Please.
You want to pass them down? I don't know. I think I have a dozen.
so I know this is always dangerous when you hand something. You might not listen to the content of what I say, which is a little different than some of the elements in that sheet. So our mission is focused on being inclusive, on feeding the human spirit and healing the world. So feeding the human spirit takes us to a lot of our spiritual care programs. These include things like community groups, which are gathered around a theme each month. The theme this month is trust. They're small groups of about 8 to 10 individuals who meet for about 90 minutes, focused on the theme. In addition, we have a robust pastoral care ministry where at any time there might be a chaplain meeting one-on-one for individual pastoral care if I or the other minister at the congregation is not providing that. We also have a couple of support groups. For example, we have a support group for members of our community who are caregivers for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia. So that's kind of our spiritual care programs in a whole. On Sundays, in addition to the worship services, we also have our children's programming, which is broken up into small groups for age cohorts. Our children's program right now is unfortunately pretty small. It's a trend across many denominations in the U.S. right now. But we have small groups, somewhere around 30 to 40 children broken up into small groups of about 6 to 10 with adult facilitators. Then in the evenings on Sunday, right now we have a youth group. Participation there is about 40 youth and about 5 to 8 facilitators, again, facilitating that youth group. We also have some outreach ministries. Our outreach ministries are focused in several justice areas, including our LGBTQI+ ministries, our immigrant and refugee ministries, a partnership with Chancellor Ave Elementary School, which is in Irvington, That partnership doesn't really show up much on our site. We're going for game nights or tutoring at the school itself. We have a partnership with 2 congregations, a Unitarian congregation in Baroque, Transylvania, and a Unitarian congregation in Jawai, India. We are currently the day site of Summit Warm Hearts, which is part of the Summit Interfaith Council. It's a ministry to housing and food insecure individuals, although in April that program will be moving off of our site to another location, and so we don't anticipate moving that program to the proposed application before you.
There was a question before we started about weddings and funerals.
Yeah,
Can talk
thank
about
you.
the frequency of those events?
Absolutely. So we do have weddings, baby blessings, and child dedications, as well as funerals. Now, the baby blessings and the child dedications, I would say about 95% of the time, those are included in the Sunday service itself. They're an element within it. The funerals can range in attendance from anywhere from 60 to about 200 attendees, and unfortunately, because of the size and limitations of our present sanctuary, we have had several beloved members who passed away, and we had to decline having the funeral at our facility because it just was impossible to accommodate the number of people. Again, 118 seats from which you can actually see and hear. And then when you add in knowing that you might have a higher number of individuals coming with a walker or coming in a wheelchair, it becomes very difficult in our space to have those memorials. In terms of weddings, we actually don't see very many weddings right now on site. Our last wedding was in September. I would say prior to COVID, we were probably averaging somewhere between 3 to 4 weddings at most a year, and the receptions were always off-site. More and more couples want to have it at a venue where they can have an outdoor service and then have the reception at a catered location, and so we're not seeing as many weddings in our sanctuary as we once were. I don't anticipate that to change with what I'm seeing. I still officiate quite a few weddings for our members, but they've all been off-site.
And the new facility does not have a hall or? You could
Right,
have a
exactly.
reception, Is that correct?
That's correct. So I think it would be even less desirable than our present location to host a wedding.
And are there other special events you have during the year that will continue to be held?
We do have a wonderful ministry. It's a supporting organization of the congregation called Afternoon Music. They have concerts about 3 times a year, about somewhere between 120 and 150 attendees for those concerts. And we're hoping that they will move to the new location, although the acoustics may not be as they are in our present sanctuary. So.
And when do they occur?
They're on Sunday, usually in the early afternoon. That's why it's called afternoon music. So it's usually between 3 and 4.
All right, do you want to take a quick spin through your typical week statistics in terms of, I think it's pretty much self-evident and we've already covered most of it, but this will give everyone in writing an idea of the numbers of people that are there on various days of the week, and show that I think that other than on Sunday morning, the parking is going to accommodate all of these uses on site.
Yeah, so if you look at the typical weekly schedule, one thing I would just, kind of lift up is you're looking at if you assume Summit Warm Hearts is moving come April, really the during the week usage, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, is somewhere between 10 to 16 individuals, and it's spread across the day, so that's not even at one given point. Our choir does rehearse on Thursday evenings. We have 24 members in the choir. That might grow a little, but we don't anticipate a great deal given the size of the sanctuary and how many people will be able to actually perform. And then our highest use, as we've already noted, is on Sunday, and right now this schedule is built for 2 services, which in addition to breaking the congregation apart, adds significant staff hours and resources from us. So we're also looking to reduce some of those costs and some of that wear and tear on folks by going to one service.
And what is, just for everybody's information, what is Warm Hearts?
So Summit Warm Hearts is the program for individuals who are housing and food insecure. It runs from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And again, it's, moving shortly.
You're not planning on hosting that?
No, we are not.
And is there any space that's you're planning on using as a homeless shelter of any kind? Or?
No, no,
No, so there's nothing like that proposed for the new site?
no, there's not.
Thank you. So I'd like to turn a little bit to the current proposal, and if you could just briefly describe the planning process that the church went through with its professionals to arrive at the plans.
Yeah, absolutely. So we began by first having congregational meetings about even obtaining the property at the Red Cross, and then exploring really what would be some of the opportunities there that simply don't exist where we are or at 309 Springfield, our previous application. Once we made the decision to move forward, the congregation put together a team, which we call the Facilities Expansion Team, or FET. Unitarian Universalists love acronyms, so stop me at any point if I start acronyming it up. The FET is composed of members of the congregation that have different skill sets. So we have some members who are architects. We have some members who have experience with sustainability, which is a priority for this project for us because of our faith values. And so that team gathered together and then began the process of exploring who we would have as an architect. We were really clear that the architect absolutely had to have experience in building religious space, in particular sanctuaries, because they have a unique set of needs, and it's not the same as some other projects. And we were hoping to find someone, but we weren't sure we could, who had an experience in a Unitarian Universalist space. And that's exactly why we picked Louis Cherry after a search across the country. He's not only built several sanctuaries and been able to design really effectively for the needs of worship, but he's also specifically worked with Unitarian Universalists, which creates some different elements in the design, and he understands our values and faith.
So would you say that the design you've arrived at really is a reflection?
Roger, make sure you speak into the
yeah.
microphone.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry you have to share.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that the design you've arrived at is really a reflection of your core values and your faith in terms of the physical manifestation of it in the building?
Yeah, absolutely, in several ways. So early on, Louis and the team, we also were really excited that Louis, when we were interviewing, brought the landscape architect, Tavis, together, because for us, with that value of interdependence, relationship with the earth, we have many people who are earth-based in their spirituality, is really key to us. We have equinox services, solstice services. The rhythms of nature are important to us. Much of our curricula from our denomination calls for us to take our children outside and have an experience outside, in the natural environment. We're not able to do that at our present location. And so to have Louis and Tavis come together, and their initial design was, which led to what is before you, was a nautilus, this sense of spiritual evolution, also of having these curves that really interplayed with the natural environment. We weren't at odds with the landscape, but the landscape architecture was woven in from the beginning. We were going to be able to have a design that we think could get us to net zero or very close to it. That's a key value for us. And it was a space that evoked a spirituality without having overt symbology that would be exclusive to particular members in our community, but really evoked these values of being in harmony with nature, the roundness of being, welcomed into a space that's inclusive, coming into a sanctuary where the natural light is at play, where we can have worship in the round. All of these features were very intentional in the design to be expressions of our faith and to allow us to better practice our faith.
Now, I think you described some of the benefits of the new proposal, particularly the ability to have one service
Mhm.
for Sunday and to have some on-site parking. Did you actually consider whether the existing building could be saved or reused?
We did. In honesty, this has been, as I look back over the records, and I've spoken to our prior ministers, the conversation about our space and the struggle with our space actively began in the congregation 40 years ago. I mean, this has been ongoing and recurrent, and it has really been a present and persistent challenge that has only grown also as our denomination and as our faith. We just passed these new 6 values centered in love. As all of these things have happened, it has made it, our space has been consistently more inconsistent with the practice of modern Unitarian Universalism.
So in the course of your planning, did you hold meetings with the neighbors or reach out to neighbors?
Absolutely. So we held 4 meetings in total. We also went door to door and did just, knocked on doors, introduced ourselves. We shared some flyers both for community events that we were hosting at the space as well as for the meetings. We developed an email list with the neighbors who attended meetings and continued to give updates to them. In December, we heard concerns that there was a rumor, there were several rumors. One, that we were creating a homeless shelter, another that we were going to be building a deli, and another that we were, I don't think a Unitarian Universalist deli, for the record, would be a very exciting thing, but at any rate. And then there was a concern that we were putting storefronts up at the site. So we developed an FAQ in response to the concerns that we were hearing. We held an additional neighbor meeting, and then we went door to door with the FAQ, talking to folks, handing it out, seeing if there were additional questions. I also had a meeting with the principal at Wilson Primary Center because we really want to be in good relationship with the school as well. I mean, they're close to our property, and the playground's right there. So, and we envision, one of our hopes for this property is that it really, unlike our present space, which is kind of, we're landlocked and we're kind of like the doors are closed most of the time. It's not a very permeable property, if you will. We really hope that this will continue to be a community property. It has that quality. My office is over there, so I see people walking their dogs across the property. There's one person who walks her cat in the rhododendron near us. We put a labyrinth in there. There are families consistently out at the labyrinth. There are other families that cross over our property to pick children up from Wilson Primary Center. So we hope that quality of really shared space, that the contemplative spaces we are creating, the labyrinth that will be there, continue to feel like community space, not just something that is reserved for our membership.
So just to summarize, would it be your opinion that this project is directly related to the Beacon's religious life and necessary to secure its future and to keep it a strong and thriving community?
Absolutely. I think COVID in a way also made us realize how important it is to be able to be together. And it was really painful coming back when we realized we were back in 2 services and we were back in the split dynamic. We have members regularly who only go, like many communities, who only go to the 9:30, and we have folks who only go to the 11. And sometimes it can be years, and they meet each other, and they'll say to each other, "Oh, hello, like, is this your first time here?" And the person will respond, "No, I've been coming for a decade." And that's not great given how we operate as a faith, when relationship and one-to-one contact is so important.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions for Reverend Tanner.
Okay, thank you. I'll first look to our board experts to see if they have any questions for this witness.
Not at this time, I don't have any.
Okay,
I have a few questions.
sure. Ed.
With regard to the building form and shape that is proposed under the architecture, and maybe this is a question more for the architect, but I thought you might want to add to this, is that how did you arrive at that ultimate form of the building, including the ancillary parts of the building, realizing that there's a parking deficit that's being asked for. And I'm sure you'll have testimony regarding that. But have you
Sure.
explored other options as far as available parking on the property?
We did, and I would say, in terms of the other options, the engineers might be better prepared than the architect to answer that. But I will say the other spaces, the landscape spaces, to us include things that aren't like an extra add-on. There's a memorial space that we don't have in our present building that we really long for a way to memorialize members of the congregation. So that's one space. I mentioned the contemplative space in the labyrinth. That's a core practice in many Unitarian Universalist congregations. So that was something that we brought up pretty early on in the process and said, we really want to have a labyrinth. Is there any way that we can have a labyrinth? We need a space also to be able to have small, intimate outdoor worship, which is sometimes in UU communities called outdoor circle worship. And then the organic play areas were important because our children are quite literally right now climbing the railings on the outside of our building. So, they seem core to us in terms of the programs of the congregation and its mission.
The outdoor gathering spaces or the play area, that's primarily during services being used?
Primarily during services, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No daycare centers being
No,
proposed as part of
no,
the
no.
facility? Okay. You mentioned that this is to consolidate to one service on a Sunday, and I think your application covers that. Are you going into this with the understanding that you're going to submit that to the board, that you're looking just for one service on a Sunday
Yeah.
at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to confirm that.
Yeah. We don't know the exact time. That'll be a whole,
Okay, because that goes
Process,
to the
but-
whole discussion about use.
yeah.
and
Yeah,
consideration.
probably about 10 a.m. a single service is what we're looking at.
Okay. You have some connections to adjacent properties. What was the intent for that?
As I said, we were really interested in keeping access points, and I think the landscape architect will be really well poised to speak to this in specific instances. But to create a property where people don't feel like they're trespassing if they're walking their dog, or if they're trying to access the parkland, or if they're trying, right now, people regularly park in our parking lot and then walk over to the courts. Or they might park there and then walk over to Wilson Primary Center because they have a child there. So I think creating some of that feel of like community relationship and openness was very intentional. You'll see that we have 2 entrances as well. We have a turnaround in the back now to really ease the flow of movement on a Sunday, again, in consideration of the neighbors.
Okay. You had mentioned the funerals and weddings in some of those events. When do the weddings you had mentioned occur on the Sunday, most likely?
Most likely on a Sunday. Sometimes they will be on a Saturday, like around between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Funerals are typically Saturdays around the same time. Every now and then we get a funeral where they want to have it at 2 p.m., but usually they're somewhere between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have.
Thanks, Ed. Questions from the board for this witness? Mr. Curran?
Hi, thanks. Just some clarity around membership. I think you had mentioned 454 members and friends, 354 which were members.
Correct.
And then you referenced kind of a 40-year range of 400 to 520.
Yes.
So how does that, was that including the friends? Is that not including the friends?
It does include friends, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then when you speak about members, that includes children or no?
No, we don't count children in our membership. When they turn 16, they're able to join the congregation.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, a couple questions. So the handout you gave us tonight, looks like you're saying the average attendance at the early service is 63 and the second service is 98.
That's right.
So the
Yep.
total is about 160.
Yep.
My memory may be faulty, but it seems several years ago, Was attendance higher several years ago? As I thought we were talking about higher numbers.
It was higher, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We've not really, a lot of the folks that join us online now haven't come back in person. We had quite a few members move. So, yeah.
And
Just to clarify, are you continuing to stream your services for members?
Absolutely. That's one of the appeals of the new property. Our current property, we have a lot of issues. We're limited in how we can put cameras up and wire it because of the age of the sanctuary and the materials that are there. So one of the things we're hoping for is actually this will increase both hearing assistance devices and the live stream experience because we'll have a better tech setup.
And I know we'll hear from parking later, but just for the record, your current site, how many parking spaces are on your property now?
Well, we have 6 spots right now.
And are there, I'm going to guess they're pretty much reserved for staff and,
Yes.
yeah, so
pretty
all,
much.
currently all parishioners, all people come park on the street?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Where, in the new building, are you going to have a residence there as the pastor?
No.
You won't be living on site?
No.
Okay. And you said you're the president of the Interfaith Council right now. The members of the Interfaith Council, how many, can you tell me around how many of those members have congregations or where they're able to have their whole congregation in one service? You're saying is that, you don't want to split between 2 services, but I know there are other churches within the town that have multiple services because of space restrictions or just, I mean, and I know that you say yours is based on love, but you can say that with every church. So how many others are trying that have one, or want to have one service and can't?
I would have to ask the members of the Interfaith Council on who wants to have one service. I mean, some of them have different services intentionally. There's been, like some of our members, for example, have a Spanish-speaking service and then an English-speaking service. So that would seem to me it's serving a different need. I can comment on the size of sanctuaries and say that from our proposal, there are several communities that have much larger sanctuaries than what we are proposing in this application, including St. Teresa's, for example, Central Presbyterian, Calvary Episcopal, and Fountain Baptist.
But they do have multiple services.
I don't think they all do, no. Fountain, for example, doesn't. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Is there a philosophical reason in your church that you want to have one service? I think you alluded to it, but is that part of the reason why you want one service?
Yeah, so we have something called congregational polity, which many of those other communities that I listed do not have congregational polity. So within congregational polity, what that means is each congregation is autonomous. We don't have a bishop, for example, and it's less of a top-down from our denomination. We actually send delegates from our congregation every year to something called General Assembly, where the whole denomination makes decisions together. So being able to gather and build relationship becomes really important because we need to know where our members need to have opportunity to talk about resolutions that are coming up at our General Assembly. We need to have the relationship to be able to understand what we're thinking and feeling so that those delegates are able to speak on behalf of the whole congregation. We call our own ministers, so our whole congregation has to gather to bring a minister in, for example. So the polity, we have a really different way of making decisions. Christ Church is the only other, and Fountain Baptist are the only other 2 that I'm aware of in town that also have congregational polity as we do. Yeah.
Thank you.
I also have one question. So, right now, you have about 161 people between 2 services. That includes the children.
Mm-hmm.
As a parent of 4 children, I can say that going to church is not easy, right, on a weekend when sports rule and
Sure.
music concerts and everything. And my question is, how, is it possible, how are you do you have a sense of whether you might actually have less attendance in total when you move to one service because people have conflicts? Because one week somebody with children goes to the 9:30 because it doesn't conflict with softball. And
Yeah,
the next week
sure.
they go to 11. You know, how do you see that impacting your attendance?
I think it's quite possible, but at the same time, we do know that we have funerals that will need the capacity of the sanctuary. We do know that, like our Christmas Eve service, we are going to need this capacity. So reducing it, much lower. We already went from a proposal several years ago that was 400 seats to about 291 with this present proposal. And that was in part out of, we're smaller now. We don't see the potential for great growth, but also wanting to balance that need when there is a memorial where we need 200, seats available. So it is possible. It's a risk.
Don?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions for you. You got to stop jumping motorcycles. Stay off the crush.
At least it was hiking. It wasn't like I was walking.
So the schedule you gave us tonight, A1,
Yeah.
that's at your current location.
Correct.
So do you anticipate this schedule to be maintained at the new location? And it looks like it operates from roughly 8 o'clock in the morning to some nights to 9 p.m. every night, every day of the week. I mean, I might be off by half an hour or something, but do
Sure.
you anticipate that being the same way?
Well, I think the thing that will change is when Warm Hearts moves, we'll be starting later in the morning. And if you look at the schedule, like, for example, Tuesday says 7:30 to 9 p.m. a board meeting of about 12 attendees. That's only once a month.
Okay.
So there's several things here. The community group on Mondays, that's twice a month. So there are several things in here where it's not going to be that full schedule every single week. It's going to be out across the month. So we do see some changes. And then I would say the Sunday schedule would be drastically shortened, right? When you're going to one service, that pulls everything into a closer time period. So I think that would be a much shorter day than it is presently.
And then you had mentioned, I think it was the FET committee?
Yeah, the facilities expansion team.
What was the, mission of that team? Was it to make something that, I guess you fit it to your use as opposed to the size of the property that it's on? Like, did you say to them, hey, let's make something fit on this lot without any variances? Or did you say, let's look at how many people our congregation is, our daily use of it, anticipated uses like weddings, funerals, or anticipated growth of, because let's face it, more people are going to come when there's more room. What was your exact mission to them? Because we just had an
Yeah.
applicant that is going to come back because he realized that he can maybe make the thing fit, maybe not. It seems like you're asking for a lot on something that maybe you could have redesigned to fit without all of us being here. Maybe, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That might be a question better for the design professionals.
Okay. Well, the reason why I asked is I guess you organized the team, right? Or
The
you-
board did. Yeah, the board of
did.
trustees.
Okay,
So,
so we'll wait for the professional.
yeah, so I
Okay.
think it's a good question for the architect.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Can you foresee in the future, everything is going great, that you may have to add 2 services?
No,
Okay.
I think it would be hard. I think the congregation would probably oppose it.
Okay. So now we will take questions from the audience. Reminder, you come up, please state your name, spell your last name, give us your address, and this is questions only of this witness. Please do not make any statements. That'll certainly expedite this part of the hearing, and please.
Hi, Erwin Miller, 5 Nob Hill Drive. I'm wondering, you had said that Warm Hearts is not coming with you to the new property. I'm wondering if there's a way, I don't know if this is a board question for you, to put in guarantees that in the future there are no shelters or other types of facilities that will welcome in folks from outside Summit who have potentially have mental health issues next to our kindergarten. Is there a way to guarantee that? Can we put that in sort of any writing? Because I know that that's not the plan now, but once it's built, you can make it the plan. So is there a way to ensure that there are no homeless serving facilities next to Wilson Primary School?
So one thing I would say is that we're going to create to start, we're not building a shelter. But second, we are really intending to have outreach ministries there that are consistent with our neighbors, including Wilson Primary Center, which is why I took the time to meet with the principal and be in conversation. And so we're very mindful that this site is different than the one that we are at presently, and that there's a school next to us. And two, my understanding is even if we wanted to have the same outreach ministry, we would have to go through a series of inspections and considerations. That's not something that we can just do. I mean, even with the day program at Warm Hearts, we had to go through that process. So beyond that, I'm not sure.
Would you be
With
open, would a condition work for something like that, Mr. Ball? Would you be open to a condition on the application?
I think we would. Yeah, not run a homeless shelter, sure.
Not creating space to do it. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I have a question. So if you have permission to have Warm Hearts now, doesn't that carry over into, it doesn't carry over to the new
No, it's a new
location?
site.
Okay, so it's all,
Yeah.
okay, so,
Correct.
Yeah.
thank you.
Please.
Sorry, hold on.
So they very explicitly said a shelter facility.
Right.
Are we, the question from the resident was more or less homeless outreach, including meals. Are they willing to expand the definition from a shelter, which is domiciling people, versus sharing it at the facility, whether that's food services or other?
The church is not hosting people at its site, not planning on doing that. So, I mean, I think the condition could contemplate that as well.
Okay.
It's
Thank
just,
you.
I think the way that the whole way the community is dealing with people with the homeless problem is much different than it was 20 years ago when people were sleeping in church basements on a rotation. That's been gone for a while now, and it's not coming back. So.
Yeah, there's a real discouragement in trying to transition from congregant-based shelter programs to rapid rehousing. A lot of that started because of the pandemic, but then we learned as we went, which is why organizations now like Family Promise, for example, no longer do congregant-based shelter.
Hi, Kim Leonard, Leonard, 81 Beekman Road. I noticed, and it was also mentioned tonight, that you do have pathways going up to Wilson Park. We live on Beekman Road, and my question to you is, do you anticipate, since you have so few parking spaces for an almost 20,000 square foot building, that the traffic will come up Oakley, up Beekman, and park in Wilson School parking lot? And because it would be very easy for them to walk down the path. That would be the closest, people
Sure.
take the least resistance
Yeah.
way to get somewhere, and that seems to
Yeah.
be the closest.
Yeah. So we don't anticipate that. I think that it'll be answered much more robustly by the parking study and our expert.
Okay,
who
I
will
just wanted to
explain
know,
what we
are
do
you aware
anticipate.
that we have a very big problem on Beekman Road with parking? We have for 7 years had temporary no parking signs in front of our house for 7 years.
Yeah.
Because the issue has not been addressed.
I-
So
Yeah,
it's a concern.
yeah, I'm sorry for that.
And one of your experts is traffic, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
The public will have
The
ample
park-
opportunity to ask questions of every witness that the applicant presents. Please, sir.
Hi, name is Carl Carfy, Carfi, live at 1 Oakley Ave here, and I'm looking for just a little bit of clarity on Roger's opening statement, which I'm sorry, I don't know your last name, Roger.
That's okay.
But I think you may be able to provide. So the statement was that if this project gets approved here at 695, you would sell your current properties, both current properties.
Correct.
But there was a June 2021 discernment letter to the congregation that stated if you decide against building at 695 Springfield, you'll work with the congregation to determine whether to revive plans to build at 309 next door to your existing building. And my question is, since you stated that attendance is less than it was less now than it was previously, why isn't 309 still a viable solution?
I think that was, if you look at the plan that's before us now, 309 still had no outdoor space. 309 still had no on-site parking whatsoever. This is a much better solution for the church, and it's much less impactful, I think, on the immediately surrounding neighborhood.
But it was a viable.
But I don't think we're going to go into a colloquy here. That's probably the longest question I've heard in a while, but
Appreciate that.
That's really the answer. I mean,
But 309 was a viable solution
when we
at
had
one
no
point,
other options,
and you still own it.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jeff Sullivan, 12 Passaic Avenue. So I just had a question about the clarity about the faith itself and how it relates to worship. And so it is, you're saying there's interfaith, but you mentioned Christmas. And my question is around high holidays and other types of events or services or worship that would draw a different number of people and on other days other than Sunday.
Sure. So right now, so the community includes folks who are Unitarian Universalist Christians. I'm one of them. It also includes individuals who are Unitarian Universalist Buddhists, but that doesn't mean that we celebrate every holiday as those communities would. We do have a tradition of having a Christmas Eve service, so that is one that's outside of the Sunday time. And we have done a small winter solstice service as well. And those are really the primary ones.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you.
How you doing? Matt Starker, 15 Oakley Avenue. Quick one. Do you serve alcohol at any of your current events?
Afternoon music does have alcohol at the reception.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, how are you? Nicole DeLauro, 1 Oakley Ave. You mentioned sustainability as being part of your core values. So why would you choose to basically have a total rebuild instead of renovating and expanding, which would be more consistent with adaptive reuse, which is a preferred method for sustainability?
So part of it has to do with and the architect and engineer will be able to speak to this a little bit more than I can. But a couple elements are the condition of the current property, but also their location in placement in the property and where parking is needed. There's a large garage that was formerly the bays for the ambulances. When the Red Cross had ambulances there. We're actually not allowed to use that garage because it's in such a poor condition. So there really isn't, there are some aspects where the property is in such a condition that it wouldn't make sense. It's also where the position of those buildings are. And then in addition, we will be taking elements out of the building for reuse, and we're going to work with a company that helps us do that. So it's not just like take it down and everything goes to waste, but we're actually trying to save as much of that primary residence that were the offices for the American Red Cross as we possibly can in consideration of the sustainability. But it wasn't an easy decision we came to. We tried to look at configurations that would still give us the parking and give us the values of how what we want the building and the design to communicate, in addition to the physical condition.
Do you know exactly what you would be able to keep?
Well, we're looking at things, for example, like some of the interior, like mantles and elements of the staircase, but we're also looking at what's the possibility of taking some of the stones from the foundation, for example, what condition they're in, and actually giving them to other builds. So that's another way of looking at it.
I mean, I moved from Hoboken, and I moved out of an urban environment into a suburban environment.
Yeah.
And part of the draw to me about Summit is the different characteristics of the homes, and that character kind of upholds the high real estate value within the town itself. So have you had any studies or input from real estate experts within the town to see how the proposed development at 695 is going to affect the value of all the surrounding homes?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think it's relevant to my home, so I would disagree with that statement. Thank you.
I'm Brett Bond, B-O-N-D. I live at 678 Springfield. I just want to ask you, is there a residence at all at the new church? I think you mentioned that there was a program that you have, and I can't remember if it's at the existing location or the new one, to do with maybe sheltering women or people who are at risk.
So in the past, we had had a shelter program. Well, it wasn't really a shelter. It was part of Family Promise. So we used to provide housing for 2 weeks at a time for women, for families, which included women. But that program, Family Promise, that organization no longer does that congregant-based shelter. We are also a sanctuary congregation, which does provide supportive housing, temporarily short-term stay to someone who is at risk.
So will there be plans at the new location to have housing for people that are at risk on either a temporary basis or repeating basis?
There may be, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Hillary Academy, 684 Springfield Avenue, directly across the street. Just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the Sunday music concerts, or I
Sure.
know that in the past you've had some things outside with loudspeakers and a lot of music going on. Is that something that's going to happen regularly? Is that going to be moved indoors once you have your new?
Yeah, that would be moved indoors. The outdoor events would be things like our annual Easter egg hunt.
Okay, so there's no music concerts planned for outdoors on a regular basis?
No,
or
the
ever?
afternoon music is all indoors, and it would remain that way. And the kinds of, they're mostly doing classical music and jazz, and we wouldn't want, that would be indoors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi. Nick Ismert, ISMERT, 38 Oakley Avenue. So I think in the prior submission, the Historic Preservation Commission formally objected to the application. They stated that the proposed structure scale, massing, tree loss would drastically alter the character of the neighborhood. And then they also explicitly stated that the proposal is inconsistent with the city's master plan and development design guidelines, impairing the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance. Given that, has there been any attempt to address any other feedback about the size, the scale, design of the property?
Yeah, I think the architect has more expertise to answer your question.
Do you know if there is any attempt to address that, though?
I think the architect will be able to speak to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, Ingrid Carlbom, that's CARLBOM, 21 Oakley Avenue. I want to ask again about traffic and the traffic studies you've done, because there are a number of people from Oakley Avenue here,
Sure,
but
yeah,
they
I
have, I've
understand.
lived here now with my husband for 30 years. They don't remember what it was like when we had soccer in the field, and it was just too crowded. And we had to call the police
Just keep in mind, this is for questions only.
Okay.
And also keep in mind, a traffic engineer will be testifying about the traffic conditions.
So we can ask questions later?
That's probably the best time
Because-
for
well,
it, the specifics of
Let
the
me
traffic.
just finish saying, we had to call the police a lot, and we had
Now's
some
not the
lot.
time for
Okay,
commentary.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Hello, Gorka Sarasa, S-A-R-A-S-A, 37 Oakley Avenue. So my question is, are you going to, and I'm using the word going to, rather than avoiding anticipating, probably not planning, so it's a very specific question.
Mhm.
Are you going to organize events like Mardi Gras party, like movie night, where alcohol is served, or
No.
without alcohol?
No.
And are you going to organize events like that, like a Mardi Gras party, or summer party, or winter party?
No, I mean, we have one annual fundraiser a year, which is our auction, but other than that, no.
Will there be alcohol in that fundraiser?
At times, there has been alcohol, and we follow all the licensure and requirements to have a server, and that is
And at what
required
time
in
do
New
you-
Jersey.
Are you going to finish those events?
All of our events pretty much wrap up by 9 p.m. I mean, many of our congregants are older, or families with young children, and so we're not usually out past 9.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Court Jeske, 32 Beekman Road. I just have two questions. One, could you provide a little clarity on the shelter that was
Sure.
discussed earlier? How many people are you currently housing overnight on average? And you weren't really sure about if it would continue in the future, but maybe just start with how many you are dealing with today.
We don't house anyone overnight right now. We have the day program that is
Right.
9 a.m. to 1 p.m., but that's moving. The overnight component of Summit Warm Hearts is housed at 3 other local faith communities, and it just ended for the year, actually.
Got it, but there's a chance you would house that in the future?
No. We wouldn't house either the overnight or the day program for Warm Hearts.
Okay, I misunderstood earlier. I don't know if anyone else did.
Yeah, the sanctuary location, is that what you're referring to,
Yes.
sir?
So we have provided at different times a sanctuary space specifically for one individual who may be a refugee and need temporary place until until we're able to get them housing. It's very short term usually, and it's someone where we're working with a community. So it's very different than like a shelter program as you're describing it.
Thank you for the clarity on that.
Yeah.
Secondly, I believe you said you've been in your capacity for 8.5 years.
Yes.
Okay. How long do you know you'll be in that capacity leading the church in the future?
So in our congregations, we're called by the congregation, and then we aren't moved like by our denomination. So it would really be either I did something terrible, and then they would call a congregational meeting and dismiss me, but that would be misconduct or something of the kind, or I would decide at some point to move on. We have had very long tenured ministries, in part because Summit is a wonderful place to be, and the congregation is also a wonderful place. So our most recent minister who left after 18 years.
And so that next minister would have the ability to decide a lot of these things or change the direction.
No, it's because we have congregational polity. The ministers really have to partner with the Board of Trustees, and most major decisions within the congregation actually lie with the Board of Trustees, not with the minister.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one clarification on the sanctuary question.
Sure.
In the new plan, how many people could seek sanctuary at any given time?
1
Is that one person or one family?
person.
Hi, John Burke, 29 Fairview Ave. I had a follow-up question on something that someone else asked earlier. It was about the potential to have a residence for someone at risk, potentially a woman, or I guess it could fall into a different category. So I guess my question is, and I believe the response was, there may be a facility for that at some point in time in the church. So does that mean that it has not been defined whether or not there will be any residents at all? And if so, how many or for what purpose?
So it's not a residence in the sense of like, it's not an apartment that someone is coming into and living in for a long time. This is a very short term for a single individual. And it would be for someone, for example, like, you know, if someone became unhoused in Summit, there are different resources available to them that would be made available. Sanctuary is, you know, something that many religious communities reserve the religious right to offer, and, you know, is obviously in public debate right now.
So is it safe to say that it would be a single unit for a single individual?
It'd be a single room for a single individual for a short-term period, yes.
So it doesn't have a kitchen,
No,
bathroom?
no.
Okay, thank you.
How about, ask a question for clarity on that. You said that you will not have residents at the new location. So if there is an individual there, are they staying overnight in the facility by themselves, or is somebody in the congregation there? Do you let somebody like just stay in the facility with nobody else?
No, someone in the congregation would be with them.
So that
most likely,
somebody else
yeah.
would be living there during the time the person who's at risk is living there?
Well, yeah, for like a shift or something, but not for the whole time, no.
But they won't be there alone
Correct,
on the premises?
correct.
Hi, Christina Cogan, C-O-G-A-N. I live on 686 Springfield, right across the street from the church. Hi, Reverend Ronnie. I know we've talked about this, and one of my concerns with any sheltering is whether or not you plan on running a background check, especially being that there is a primary center. In my opinion, you're responsible for the individuals that are being housed there, so how do you plan on making sure that these people are safe to be around children since it's in close proximity to a school?
So in addition to have someone, and this is like a rare occurrence if so, but if this was the case, in addition to having someone there present, we do work with other partners so that if we're not able to run a formal background check, like we do, for example, with all of our adult guides for our children programming, then we have other ways of at least checking on the person's reputation, where, you know, who in the community can vouch for them, how long have they been known, those kinds of things.
Could you expand on that? Like, how do you check for them? Like, how do you check on them if you're not able to run a background check to ensure that these people can be safe to be in literally a stone's throw away from a child, or use that bathroom that's very
Yeah.
close to the church?
So the problem is you can do a limited check on someone, but if they don't have a social security number because they're not a US citizen, then you can't do a full background check. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Can I ask a question before the next public person?
sure.
Are you currently providing sanctuary services where you are now?
So, we do reserve the right at our current property to provide sanctuary for someone.
Or are you doing it now?
I'm not going to answer the question on whether or not we're providing it at this moment. I will say that we're equipped to do it, but for the safety of the community, I'm
'Cause I'm a little confused between a shelter and a sanctuary.
I can tell you, Mr. Nelson, I got the city's approval for the room in which is used as a sanctuary room at Fort Waldron.
I'm sure you did.
And I got, the fire department went through it, we complied with all the codes, I went through the zoning officer, and it's a traditional function of a church, to provide
I
sanctuary.
do not disagree. I'm just struggling with the difference between a shelter and a sanctuary. Is it terminology? Is it semantics? Is it?
I think of a shelter as something longer term. I mean, this is a very short term, one person, one room. You know, the shelter concept really, to my way of thinking, has to do with living there, at least for a period of time. You sleep there, you eat there, you shower there, you know, all those things. And that's not what we're talking about.
So Okay, I'll accept that, but then my question is, if person A stays Monday and Tuesday, and then they're able to find a place through your generosity and other generosity from the community, then person B comes in, different person, starts a different set of time frame, temporary, short-term? I mean, are we talking, could it be multiple people over a week, but each one individual at a different time? I mean, does that make sense? Am I getting to the point?
Maybe, Reverend Chair, how often do we do this? I mean, is it a daily basis? Or?
No, not at all. Well, I would say it's less than once a year. I mean, it's an extraordinary situation when all other resources have been exhausted, and we are absolutely able, to the best of our abilities, to verify that this individual, has no criminal activity in their background or anything like that.
Has there been any criminal activity at your current location?
To
your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. There was an accusation in the Warm Hearts program of a fight between two participants, and the police came and removed them. But again, that program, it's very different when you have a program where people are dropping in, and you may or may not know those individuals,
Correct.
than a single individual for a discrete amount of time who you know deeply and have done, to the best of your ability, a background check on
Okay,
them.
thank you.
So I just wanted, did I hear right, the sanctuary program is less than once a year, so it's not even?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Do you happen to know how close your current facility is to a primary center?
I don't know.
Not next door, though, right?
Not next door, yeah.
Thank you. Sir?
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Drew Crockett, Crockett, 17 Oakley Avenue. My question is fairly simple. Do you know the percentage of your congregation that are Summit residents?
I'm trying to do the math, I'm sorry. I know the sheer numbers. Slightly less than 20%. I think it, like around, between 18 and 20, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Alan Academy, KHADEMI, 684 Springfield. Reverend, can you please explain if your goal is to engage the community and interact with the community and be collaborative, why were such a small number of residents invited to interact with you and have coffee with you and learn more about it, as well as receive a notice of hearing? Meaning a very small section of Springfield residents were invited, but none of Oakley, none of Beekman, none of Fairview, and even many residents on Springfield were not aware of your intentions and had a chance to speak with you about that.
So the parameters of the notice, I believe, are actually set by the city. I don't.
200 feet is the legal standard, and we can't compel them to provide notice beyond 200 feet.
For the notice, but how
But
about
we
the-
went far beyond that when we went door to door and put flyers and knocked on doors. So we went to approximately, over the course of time, about 25 different residences. In the winter months, we didn't do as much flyering, I'll be honest. But even in February, we were out there going door to door. We did go down some of the side streets, especially when we initially moved there. We attempted to reach a much broader swath than 200. And we have an email list that it includes residents well beyond that 200 feet as well.
Yeah, I mean, just the feedback that we received who were aware of all this was that many of our
Questions
neighbors.
only. Questions, sir,
not aware.
not commentary at this point.
Understood. Thank you.
Rich Mancusi, MANCUSI, 65 Beekman Road. I know you mentioned that the plan was to have like a free-flowing space between Springfield up to Wilson. And as you can tell from the line of questioning, everyone is concerned about the general well-being of our children who play in that park, whether or not they're a member of Wilson or not. So what are going to be the considerations and boundaries set with your practitioners or congregation rather around using the park and being respectful of like the space of the school itself if there aren't going to be fences? And how do you plan on kind of making that work?
Well, I think one of the important features is that our busiest time when our children are on site is not during the operation of the school, right? So the only time that our children are on site, because they're in school too, would be on the weekends and primarily on Sunday. It's a very structured program, so the time that they're there, it's not like we just say, go ahead and run loose. You know, we have what's called a safe congregation policy. So anytime our children are inside the building or outdoors, there's a requirement for how many adults must be with them, that those individuals can't be related, so that they have background checks. So there's a lot of safety put into place in our essential policies and practices. But we're also building on the property and the landscape architecture, and the landscape architect can speak to this more, organic play areas to encourage that we're going to be staying on our property, actually, for play and for the very lessons that I talked about. So, yeah.
Thanks. I just have one more question. So how do the public outreach programs work? Will there be, public advertisement or to people who are just kind of at the park themselves? Will there be any attempt to interact to try to, recruit or have them kind of learn more about your faith?
No, we're not a particularly evangelical faith. I mean, actually, it's we tend to be a little, because we believe in this kind of inclusion, it's not a faith that focuses heavily on conversion efforts. So we don't, I mean, even doing the door-to-door to engage neighbors was, it was kind of like a new thing for many of our members of our congregation, because they didn't want people to think that we were trying in any way to convert someone or feel any pressure to participate. I mean, people are welcome, of course, but that's not generally how Unitarian Universalists, they actually find it offensive in our tradition. No disrespect to other traditions that are different.
Understood.
Thank you. Please.
Justin Lotta, 668 Springfield Avenue, almost directly across the street. Learning a lot tonight. Unfortunately, my house was not one that was approached or given any information prior to tonight, despite being directly across the street. I have two questions.
We actually did stop at your house, yeah, and I put a flyer.
Not according to my Ring doorbell, but
Okay.
let's.
Do you
I'll
have the
check that
one
again.
that announces your Ring doorbell?
I get a video of
Yeah.
everyone that approaches my
Yeah,
door. Yeah,
okay.
unfortunately, no. So I have two questions. One is, you said that the sanctuary program, you guys will continue to operate. We've debated the semantics around it being a shelter, but it's very clearly, it's an overnight stay for an individual that may or, yes, I'm contextualizing my question, thank you. Would you ever turn away a member of your congregation for, if that person had need to utilize your sanctuary program? Would you ever turn someone away? The reason why I'm asking is because you've said that it's a short-term stay.
Right.
It sounds like maybe one night. Given your anticipated growth in your congregation, given the new size, it would logically follow that you might have more people that are in need, that are
Right.
either members or friends, and we could also assume reasonably that that program there'd be more demand on that program,
Well,
given the new building.
Sure, I mean, but given the parameters that we have for it, that's one of the reasons it's so rare that it happens at all. I could definitely imagine situations where we would turn someone away.
Okay. The other one is, I've noticed that there are other, I know you've said each congregation is somewhat separate. There's not a top-down sort of approach, which is nice to hear. But there are a number of other congregations under UUA. Is that the website, the UUA.org?
Unitarian Universalist Association.
Right. So there's a number of other congregations online that state that one of their big philosophical beliefs is that they should allow people without homes to sleep in their cars on their property. I've heard some chuckles, but that is definitively a very strongly held belief of a lot of the congregations that I found online. So is that a belief of yours, that you should allow your members who are struggling to find somewhere to sleep to be able to sleep in their car on your property?
So that's not been a practice we have. We don't really, and I don't envision that would be a practice we would have at the new property either.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick reminder to everyone, board members, interested public, witnesses, please speak clearly into the mic. We're having trouble, I think, especially people who are live streaming this, hearing some of the testimony or some of the questions. So please make sure you speak into a microphone and be loud. Thank you.
Chris Tolman, 7 Beekman Terrace. I have no problem being loud. So you're going to abandon the 7 Beekman Terrace, TOWMEN. So you're going to abandon the Summit Warm Hearts program.
I wouldn't say abandon it.
well,
I mean,
gonna
it's
move it.
moving to a new location, but
Okay, so also
agreed.
popular in New Jersey is Code Blue.
Right.
Warming stations or facilities. Are you going to participate in that? Or is that in the works?
No, we don't have any plan to be a Code Blue site. There are different sites in the county that have already been worked out with the task force.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So your person needs shelter for the night. They knock on your door. They come into contact with you. How long does that background check?
That's not how it goes. So they
Okay.
can't just like, yeah, they don't knock on the
Okay, so
door.
it comes to your attention,
It's
and what's the
someone who's known
turnaround?
to us.
Okay.
There's a period of verifying, as I said, what the testimony I already gave. It's not like all of a sudden someone shows up. It's not a drop-in.
And if their background doesn't clear, they don't gain entry.
Correct.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, Rachel Brennan, 7 Fairview Avenue, Brennan. You actually read my mind a little there because I was going to ask sort of how the application process works and what is it via questions, especially knowing that there can't be an actual fulsome background check next to Wilson. What is the process? You answered it a little there, but
think I
maybe
did,
is there
yeah.
any more clarity than just it becomes known to you that you
Through
can
a
share?
partner organization, yep. So through a community organization, often who has been working with an individual. And then there's a process of asking that organization how long they've known the individual, through what way, what are the concerns, how long will this be, what is the plan for them to not make this long-term.
And then one last question. I think there was a question about if there is currently someone at your facility now, and you said you can't answer that. I'm imagining for security concerns for the individual there, or
Correct.
so if there are security concerns for someone in the facility now, those similar security concerns could arise again in the new facility?
When you say security concerns, do you mean for the individual's well-being or for the neighbors?
I suppose for I mean, I don't know the reason that it's not, in the individual's best interest to answer if there's someone there now or not, but I imagine there's some risk to security, whether it's the individual, the community, other family members of whoever. There's
no risk to the community.
But there's a risk to the individual there.
There can be, yes.
There can be. So someone who is potentially in a dangerous situation will be housed, even just for a night, but next to a primary center, which is preschool, kindergarten age kids, and a public park where people are running around,
No,
potentially?
I wouldn't agree with that, no.
Okay, so the security concerns that exist now would be
Just
different?
for their well-being. I wouldn't use the word security. I mean, for their well-being. Like, could they be without a place to be? Are they a vulnerable individual? But not because there's someone coming to get them or something like that. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Hobbs, HOBBS, 21 Beekman Terrace. Little different question, hopefully a quick one. You mentioned a number of your members are not as comfortable with Christian symbolism. And I wonder, is there any plan to have a steeple on top of the building? And would you be willing to agree to a condition that you wouldn't exceed?
There's not a plan for a steeple, no.
Nothing?
I mean, the architect can answer that more thoroughly, but shorthand, no.
Thank you.
Hi, Carl Carfey, CARFI, 1 Oakley Ave. Just following up on Mr. Lotta's previous question, which was about the potential for someone to sleep in a car in the parking lot. Can you guarantee that won't happen?
I mean, can I guarantee there'll never be someone on the property in a car?
Sleeping overnight in a
Sleeping
car?
overnight. At our encouragement? No.
Either at your encouragement or because there's not enough room for them in the current sanctuary program? either or?
No.
No,
Yeah,
you can't guarantee that.
Wait.
No, I think her answer is no, we're not going to permit that.
No,
So you
that
can
would
guarantee
not
it?
be a permitted use, correct?
Okay, you can guarantee it won't happen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can't sleep overnight in your car anywhere in town.
Please.
Julie Warren, 76 Beekman Road. So you stated earlier about 20% of your congregants are living in Summit. So my question is why this location? Why not go to 1 or 2 towns over where you would not be met with this level of resistance?
So we've been in the community, we value Summit. We've been a valuable contributor to the community for over 110 years. And we care about this community. We care to stay in this community. So that's the answer.
How does it make you feel when you look around the room and your neighbors are not welcoming of you and your congregants?
I'm not sure that's relevant, but
We're not
I am. I'm here speaking.
We're not going to answer.
It's irrelevant.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Hi, Nicole DeLauro, 1 Oakley. Just a quick question about the Summit Warm Hearts again.
Sure.
You did mention that you are not anticipating it at the new site. Can I ask why you did not abandon the Summit Warm Hearts after the potentially accused knife incident at 4 Waldron? Why it wasn't abandoned at that point?
So we were trying to make well, as you said, alleged, for one, and 2, we've been part of the city's task force on homelessness, trying to make good transition plans with all of our partners. So you don't suddenly make a quick change because you can create another problem in doing that. And so it's been an ongoing conversation with many community organizations and partners here in Summit as well as the city to make this something that's not reactive, that's well thought out, and that's done in a way that's consistent with the efforts to rapidly rehouse individuals, which has been quite successful.
How are you planning to have security at the facility when it's not being used?
We won't have on-site security when it's not being used.
Cameras or anything?
We do have cameras presently on our current site, and I would envision we would have cameras, but we won't have like a physical security person present when we're not in operation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sue Roberts, 48 Oakland Place. This is similar to the question that got asked too before me, but did you consider other locations outside of Summit, given the 18 variances that you're asking for at the current location? Did you start knowing that you were going to need much bigger space and much more exceptions?
So for this project and the present proposal, we did not consider locations outside of Summit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the plan that is being put before everyone now was originally what I would call like the what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of everything. It's the top. It's the ideal. So knowing purchasing that property that you were going to need or were looking for something much bigger than the property would allow.
I don't know that I, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so then you design something much bigger. This is like the ideal, like the home run.
I'm not sure what you're at. Can you restate the question,
Is-
perhaps?
When you're thinking about moving your church, the
Uh-huh.
property that you're moving into is much larger than one you're currently in.
Correct, yeah. Mhm.
And was this vision of this building that would need so many variances and so many approvals, the vision when you purchased that property?
Well, it's a process. So we purchased the property, then we put together the facilities expansion team. We then hired an architect and the landscape architect, and then began having small group meetings throughout the congregation. And the design is an iterative process. So it's not like we purchased the property and had the plans right away, you know.
And maybe to clarify, I mean, there's compromises made all through the design process. You start with if you've ever been involved through an organization in building a facility, you start with a wish list. You talk to everybody in the group, you get everybody's wish list, and then you start whittling. And that's the way it works. I mean, it's not, let's just try to build everything and see what we can get away with. It's a lot of compromises over a long planning process.
For example, we made changes throughout the process, right?
No, I
Yeah.
understand that, but even so, 18 variances and the size of the structure that's being put there is a large. So I'm asking if you knew in the purchasing of the property if this was going to be how large of a structure you were shooting for.
So I think I've answered in terms of the process and what we knew when we purchased it. I'm not sure. If it's a question about variances, that's probably for our attorney. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question about that, because I'm not sure? I guess, was the design driven by, and I think somebody might have asked that, by a number of people that you were trying to accommodate at the site?
I think the
For-
architect is going to be able to answer a
Well,
lot
I mean,
of
it's your
these.
congregation.
Sure.
So you had to have an
Yeah.
idea. You
Sure, of
tell
course
an
we did,
architect
yeah.
how many people you want to have.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
was that the driving factor for, and then you figure out how, you may not know how big the building needs to be to accommodate 300
Right.
people. But if you
Right.
tell your architect, is that, how the design came?
So
based on
yeah,
that?
sure, it was a factor, as was sustainability, right? There were several upfront conversations and values that we lifted up to the architect.
Please.
Hi, Hans-Erik Young, 36 Oakley Avenue. And so you stated that membership in your congregation has declined. And now with this new project, you're arguably increasing the attractiveness of your church. And my question is whether you have done contingency planning in your current designs to take into account that the new project, the new building, a big sign up front may actually increase membership over time.
I think given that our Sunday attendance, including children, is about 161, and the sanctuary accommodates 291, we do have that accommodation there. But just based on even how hard it's been to rebuild post-pandemic, I really don't expect, people's lives have changed dramatically, so we don't see a rapid growth in our future, unfortunately. We're really designing this for what our needs are.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, Carl Carfy, CARFI, 1 Oakley Ave. Question about the design process, follow-up question to the prior woman's question. Before purchasing the property, did you or anyone on your team conduct a zoning feasibility study to assess whether the proposed church could comply with the existing zoning variances?
Well, you don't get much time when you're buying a property that's publicly for sale, but I can tell you that we did take a look at that in terms of meeting with the zoning officer at the time, who was actually very supportive of this as a new site for the church. And that's, one of the things, at least that I was involved in, that I can talk about. But you don't really have a chance to do an exhaustive zoning review. We knew, of course, that we were a church and that we're conditional use, so that's quite important. But we did meet with the zoning officer just to see what the city's initial reaction would be from her standpoint.
Thank you. And would you agree that proceeding without fully understanding the zoning limitations for the site and potentially without conducting a zoning feasibility study could be seen as a failure to properly assess the risks involved in such a large-scale project?
I don't think that's a fair question, but I would say absolutely not.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you assumed the variances would be granted when you purchased the property?
No, I think any purchaser, again, I'm answering the question, but this is more for me, I think. But, you go into a transaction like this knowing that there are certain risks. And any buyer does that.
Understood. And
Because the Red Cross is not going to sell you a property with a contingency for 3 years to try to get approvals.
Understood. One last question. If you didn't assume that the variances would be granted, then you must have been prepared for the possibility of a scaled-back project. Is that correct?
No, I think that you go into this with your eyes open. So,
Eyes open.
There are a whole range of possibilities when you're or planning and presenting a project, and you deal with them as they arise.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Gorka Sarasa, S-A-R-A-S-A, 37 Oakley Avenue. So I want to follow up in the variances and more specifically in the lot size. It seems to me that it's easy to check the lot size, 2 acres. So
No, of
did
course.
anyone in the leadership check that, oh, we are below the 2 acres?
Of course.
And what was the answer given to them?
Everyone went in knowing what the lot size was, of course we did.
What was the answer when someone asked, is there a risk here? If we buy something which is below the 2?
There's always a risk, even if it were 2 acres, there'd be a risk.
And what did they answer to them?
Well, I can't tell you what my client told me, nor do I remember.
So you don't
but-
remember?
But obviously, everyone was aware of it, sure.
So how does that fit with we care with the community, but we just go ahead and buy something that we know is below the limit?
I don't even.
Just to understand from
I don't
doctor.
understand that question, I'm sorry.
So the doctor is saying, we care for the community, and then you buy something which you know that is below the 2 acres. Apparently someone said there is a risk, but you don't remember if those people, what they say or how it was addressed, that concern. So then, how does that connect with the statement of the doctor saying that we care for Summit community?
I mean, undertaking to obtain a variance doesn't mean that you don't care about the community. That's why we have a zoning.
Okay. Just to remember, how many people are Summit residents? I heard the percentage, but not the number of people.
Oh, it's in the mid-60s. I'd have to pull the exact
Sorry?
number. It's in the mid-60s. I'd have to pull the exact number, because we have 354 members, so it's about,
So how many attend? How many Summit residents attend this?
I think I just answered your question. I mean, they don't all come every Sunday, but
So is that, I don't get, sorry, it's too late. The 20% of how many people? 60? If 10% is?
it's, well, the thing is, it's like, not everyone in our congregation attends every single week,
So
right?
how many residents attend on a single week?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I would have to look at, and Sunday to Sunday, many of our members attend twice a month, not every single Sunday. It's not common in our tradition to attend every single Sunday, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Another question.
Mhm.
Are you going to rent the space for weddings?
No, we don't, we'll have weddings if they come available
Or will you
too.
rent it?
We don't have a plan to rent outside of
But will
members
you
right
rent
now.
it? I don't care about your plans. I want to know if you will or you will not.
There's nothing to rent.
Yeah,
Well, I enter your webpage and
Mhm.
it says, oh, if you want to rent our locations, click on this document. You click on this document and say, oh, if it's Waldron, contact. If it's the other location, contact us because we still are not clear on what our zoning permits are.
well, we don't rent the 695 location. We're not,
No,
We
you
don't
say that,
do
please
that.
write us if you are interested in renting it. So I don't know if you are renting, if you are planning to rent, if you are going to rent.
so.
I'm just trying to get simple.
Yeah, we have
a
made
simple answer.
weddings available and we have done rental weddings, very small, as I said. At the height was 4 weddings a year. And that was because our location right now has a reception space and a sanctuary space. Our new design does not have a reception hall. That's not in our proposed plan. So I don't know who would
But
rent a
maybe-
space.
Maybe there can be, would it be reasonable to assume that in a bigger space, more people are interested in having weddings? Because now it's a bigger space, so we can accommodate larger events.
I don't think so without a reception hall. I think I'm answering your question.
But there is an open space. People make weddings in the outside space for the reception. You have gardens, nice
I've heard
ones.
the argument.
Yeah, she's answered the question, sir.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
John Burke, 29 Fairview Ave. I think there was a sample schedule circulated amongst the board members that the sample list of activities that may occur on any given week at the church. And I believe the comment was that some of them may go as late, or if not later than 9 p.m. Does that mean that the building itself and/or the parking area will remain lit until at least 9 PM?
That would be the latest, yeah.
Would you be willing to scale that back so that the lighting is turned off earlier in the evening?
Well, it would be on,
Can I
yeah. go ahead.
interject that? I mean, the engineer will cover the lighting too, but the way the ordinance is written, and I think Mr. Ball, correct me if I'm wrong, but it basically for lighting for a thing like a church, you're supposed to turn off the lighting whenever the facility is no longer in use. So if the program ends at 7 o'clock, we're supposed to kind of power down. If it's 9 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I don't remember the language of the ordinance off the top of my head, but I imagine we'll get to the specifics of the lighting when the engineer testifies, and potential conditions on when it can be turned off, when it can be dimmed, will be discussed at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is that we would comply with whatever the ordinance requires.
So sorry, that's something that would be determined by an engineer, not by the people who are scheduling the events at the church?
The engineer's gonna testify as to what kind of lighting is on site, whether it's on a dimmer or a motion sensor, something along those lines, and then we'll hear that, I'm guessing. And, you know, if the board feels that the proposal, it needs conditions to limit it further, that's something that would be discussed in conjunction with that testimony.
So the functionality of the lights, I understand, dimming them, and they could be on a timer or whatnot, but who actually determines either the lights need to go off at 7 PM, 8 PM, 9 PM, 10 PM? How is that determined? By the engineer?
No, by ordinance and by what's going on at the church. So if there's an earlier.
So what does the ordinance say?
The ordinance says you shut them off when your facility is no longer.
So if the church decides to have an event that goes till 2 o'clock in the morning, then
No,
the
no,
lights stay on
no,
till 2?
No, and I think there's an outside time.
So what is it, is what I'm asking?
I have to look at it. 10.
We can have their engineer testify as to the specifics of the ordinance to better educate the public on what the requirements are.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Jeff Sullivan, 12 Passaic Avenue. So my, a couple of questions maybe, but they're all around the size of the worship space and attendance. And so your current space now is how many seats roughly?
Well, so there's 118 seats that you can see here. Not all of them are handicap accessible, but you could fit around 180 to 200 people in our sanctuary, but you wouldn't be able to see the service because a pillar would be in your face, and you might not be able to hear the service, depending upon where you are and how the sound, the amplified sound works. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yes.
yeah.
And then the proposed space has how many seats?
291.
Okay. And
And that's in one configuration. When we use other configurations, that's the max.
right.
Right.
Okay.
So there are other configurations that are significantly smaller.
And you're saying that maybe with the combined service, if everyone comes every week, it would be 160, 161
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah.
And then what would be the expected attendance on high holiday or like
So,
a Christmas
like the
Eve or
Christmas
whatever
Eve
is
service. Okay,
right.
so the Christmas Eve service would probably be about 220 for the single service. And occasionally, like I said, we get a memorial where we might have 200 attendees. You know, that's obviously once, twice a year on a Saturday
Okay.
afternoon.
And the proposed space is 291
Right.
seats.
So it would accommodate both of those situations, correct?
So above what the maximum potential would be in terms of needed space.
Well, yes, unless you think about having worship in the round. And then which is what we do for those equinox and solstice services, is usually we want to have worship in the round. We also do it at our annual bread communion service. And when you have worship in the round, you have to make more aisles for accessibility, so you lose seats.
And do you know how many seats you would estimate for that type of worship setup?
We've looked at different configurations where we would lose up to 4 rows on the main level. We probably wouldn't be using the balcony. So it still accommodates us at 160, but.
In the round?
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One quick question on capacity. Does that include standing or just seated 291
The
is seated?
291 is seated, that's correct.
Is there a capacity for standing?
I don't think we've really calculated what that is. You could ask the architect. I think you can always stand, but do we typically have standees?
No, our worship services are an hour to an hour and 15 long. No one is going to
So you never have people, you never reach the point where it's capacity and people stand around like they're doing tonight?
No,
But
actually,
there'll be
I
a
mean, that's why we
maximum
have,
capacity for fire code,
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
there'll be a capacity for seating and there'll be a capacity for standing, which
Yep.
you could combine and then maybe be more.
I don't-
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I did find the lighting section. If the board's interested, I can answer that question at this time.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
What I'm seeing in the ordinance is that it calls for all outdoor lighting during non-operating hours of a business, sports facility, or recreation facility shall turn it off remain on for 1 hour after the business or facility closes.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. Sir, please.
Chris Gerard, 27 Oakley Avenue. I actually have a question or two related to what the prior gentleman was talking about as far as capacity. I mean, we've heard a lot of numbers this evening. A lot of numbers considerably smaller than the actual amount of the proposed capacity, 290 or so. What have you said? I think I'm asking you to repeat yourself, so I apologize. You've said, on average now, in your current location, what is the, over the two services, what is the normal Sunday?
161.
161, substantially less than the 290. And now you've indicated other sort of special instances.
Correct.
Where maybe, I still haven't heard a number close to 290, 300, more like 250, 260, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but I would say it's not comfortable to be at capacity. I mean, that's not something we're aiming for, especially post-COVID. I mean,
I'm a regular attendee of a much larger facility, St. Teresa's, and it is at capacity sometimes, and I don't disagree with that, but I certainly live with it. It doesn't happen normally.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me what this board is asked to do is really conduct a sort of balancing act, right?
Question, sir?
Question, yes. So I guess what I'm asking is, what would it do to the overall design if the capacity for attendance in services was something less than what it is now? What if it was 200 or 250? In other words, if that's what was approved, I mean, how easy would it be to conform what you're currently proposing to something just smaller? Because it does seem to me that the overall, the biggest single feature of the proposal is how large the actual structure is in a zoning area that is primarily single-family, residential. It's a large facility. Would that be something that could be, I mean, it does seem to me that it would be something that could accommodate 90, 95% of what your activities are, a much smaller facility.
it wouldn't accommodate like some of the liturgical arts that we want to do and worship in the round. Yeah.
And I guess one further question, I am struck, and I know this has been covered, that you're in Summit. You have a long history in Summit, which is great. But you have also mentioned a couple of times this evening the desirability for your faith of environmental activities outside, sort of natural. And we're not a rural community. We're a suburban community. We are actually a city. I guess I'm asking a question that has already been asked, but it seems to me surprising that would have been that this facility, this property covers those needs.
So what's the question? I'm sorry.
That the current location would appropriately cover your desire to be sort of in a natural setting, be able to get out into the country and.
Well, I think our members all live in this area of New Jersey, which is not rural. And so to move to a completely pastoral setting would require them to also move their home. I mean, I don't think that seems reasonable.
Move there, I mean,
Like,
you can go 5 or 10
it
minutes
would-
west of Summit
Well,
and be
it-
considerably more rural than Summit itself.
I'm sorry, I think it adequately meets with the landscaping and the amount of contemplative spaces, our desire to have this spaces to worship and to have prayer and meditation in a natural environment without going to a completely rural community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, Chris Nealon, 32 Fairview Avenue, Nealon. A little bit about the faith community in Summit, and we tend to have a lot of different churches, and they're all tend to be towards the downtown of town, or at least the predominance of them. I'm interested in the decision you guys made to pursue a property that is in a part of town that does not have any churches, and removing yourself a little bit further away from the rest of the faith community within Summit, and how that may have played into your decision.
Well, we're actually moving closer. I was just speaking to the pastor at St. John's, one of the pastors the other day, because we're going to be much closer to St. John's, which will be nice. And there are other faith communities in Summit that aren't right in the downtown. The downtown there are not many properties that are available there. That's a challenge. I think I'm sure that this board is far more familiar with I am than the challenges of development in the downtown area.
Have you considered at any point using any of the public lands in the more close to where your facility is now for the outdoor space and the natural encounters you're looking to have, rather than trying to fit that in with this large building on this too small plot?
Yeah, I don't think we have a right to include the public property. It's not in our plan.
I guess asked another way, don't we all have the right to use the public space in any way we see fit during the day?
Let me
Sure.
I don't think that's a fair question. I mean, they can't just go off to the Village Green and start holding services. I mean, it's not what it's meant for. It's not what's permitted there. And the idea is to have everything on your site, not to pack up everybody on a bus and go somewhere else. But public lands are not available to the church.
Okay, thank you.
Rich QC, a man, CUSI, 65 Beekman Road. I know you mentioned that you spoke to or met with at least once the principal of Wilson. Has there been any meetings with the Department of Ed more generally, or anybody else at Wilson, around how the two buildings, especially with the size of what you are planning to do, going to coexist? Things like fire drills, evacuations, things like that happen at Wilson. I know they will go that way. Have there been any conversations or anything like that besides the one or two conversations you've had with the principal?
We did say we would explore further conversations about those very things. I sent a follow-up message. I think it's been a busy school year, so we haven't yet had those conversations, but that would be something I think we'd be open to.
Well, I think it would be necessary as a part of considering the structure that you're planning on building that's so close to the school. I would think that would be something you would want to do and make sure that gets on the calendar.
Yeah, when we can, absolutely. I agree.
Hello, Gorka Sarasa, SARASA, 37 Oakley Avenue. I have another question regarding this person who has this danger of security. Does this security concern involve self-harming?
No, and I actually disagreed with the use of the word security in the previous question.
Well, I'm just repeating what you said, security, if you can. Which words should I use?
I will answer your question, which is no, self-harm is not a concern.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Kim Leonard, 81 Beekman Road. I keep hearing the attorney, I'm sorry, you keep saying you have conditional use. of the property. Is it that your understanding that you automatically have conditional use? Or is it your understanding that you have to meet the 12 requirements under the Summit ordinance?
Believe me, I know what a conditional use is. The point of a conditional use is that the ordinance has decided that churches belong in this zone.
With 12 requirements. I can have it right here. Would you like to look at it?
You know
I have
what,
the ordinance right here.
I'm more than familiar with the ordinance.
Okay.
That's not a question. But-
Okay, so you have to meet the
But I would tell you
conditions,
that,
the
and again, I
requirements.
don't want to get in an argument, but when you are conditional use, the ordinance and the law has reached the conclusion that churches belong in residential neighborhoods. And that's what I said in my opening, and that's all.
We're not saying that churches do not belong in our community. We're saying that to
Ma'am,
be a conditional
questions.
use,
I
you
need a
need to meet
question.
12 requirements. Thank you.
That's not correct.
Kevin McGoey, 113 Woodland Avenue. Robin, somebody asked this question, but I think the lawyer answered it. When you bought this property, did you understand the zoning?
Our attorney did, yeah.
Okay, so you understood that to even have a place of worship, it needed to be 2 acres.
Our attorney understood that, yes.
Well, I was asking Robin. I
Yeah,
think
the
I can
Board
ask
of
him.
Trustees
But did
understood
you
it.
understand that?
I don't recall that I was on sabbatical at the time of the purchase.
So yes or
at the
no?
purchase, I don't recall is the honest answer.
Right. And when we look at like the plans and all the variances you're asking for, you're really asking for rezoning of this property, essentially. Are you aware of that?
I am.
Okay, you are. And a lot of the things that you're talking about that you need or that you want, if you really need them, do you maybe see that this perhaps isn't the right property for you?
I do not.
Even though you're not allowed to do what you want to do on it, you think it's the right piece of property for your purposes?
I do think it is the right property.
Okay, so do you not believe in zoning and regulations?
Sir,
I'm sorry.
they have the right to bring an application to the board, and that's what they're doing, so her beliefs about zoning regulations are irrelevant.
Okay, all right, so, but you understood everything when you, or you didn't understand the zoning when you bought it, you said? That's what you said, she was on sabbatical. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
John Burke, 29 Fairview Ave. I have a follow-up question, given the clarification that was made about the lighting. So what time does the facility close?
9 p.m. at the latest, but I mean, most nights it's much earlier than that.
So the closing time is 9 p.m.?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that means that the lights will be on in the facility and the parking lot until at least 10 p.m. every day?
No.
But they don't go off
we
until
don't-
1 hour after the facility closes, so.
I understand what you're saying, but it's not like a business where you have here are open hours. That's not how faith communities in general operate. If you don't have a program going on, as indicated in the schedule that I submitted, we wouldn't, on a night where there's no evening programming, have the lights on.
So you're saying that on an evening where you will make ad hoc arrangements on any given day to turn off the lights as soon as the programs end?
No, I'm saying that the programs are preset, and so, for
But
example.
I imagine they're not preset years in advance. That's going to vary week to week or month to month, I would assume.
No, but we know well in a month in advance, at the very least, what the schedule is.
So you'll make arrangements with the town engineer to adjust the lighting schedule on a month-by-month basis?
The town engineer doesn't govern the lighting.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know. We were talking about the town
They-
engineer before, so
they
I'm
have
trying to
con-
understand
They would have
who's
control
going to
over the
control.
lights. They control the lights on the property.
They do.
Yes.
Correct.
So I'm asking, on any given day, the lights may remain on until 10 p.m., but under no circumstances any later than that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Drew Crockett, again, Crockett, 17 Oakley Avenue. I just have a general question. I don't know the process for this, but is anybody from the Board of Education here tonight?
The board, by the way, just so you know, was one of the parties that received notice of the application.
Is it possible, Chairman, I don't know the process, to request for the public to have their point of view put forward here at some point over the course of this process?
There's no way we can mandate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Najma Carey, C-A-R-E-Y, 29 Oakley Avenue. I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the pastoral setting, and we live, we've got Wilson Park. What about the trees that are going to be cut down for your parking?
So I think the landscape architect can probably speak in more detail about why some of those trees need to go. It was submitted in our application. I'm not an expert. We will lose some trees. Some of those trees are actually toward the end of their life cycle. In fact, when we came onto the property, as you might know, we had to do some work because of falling limbs and some other situations with some of those trees. But we're replanting.
Okay.
And the planting that we're doing certainly meets the requirements that we have. But we're actually adding, in terms of the planting, we're prioritizing native plants. I mean, we're making decisions to actually improve that site because of our values.
And I remember when I was there for that meeting when you had at the facility.
Yeah, I remember.
And you had mentioned, you had the solar panels.
Yes.
And that was one of the neighbors that was concerned about the height of the solar panels and seeing it from the people who live on Springfield Avenue.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. That's a great, and that's your question, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So we did take that back, both to the architect and the engineer, and asked, is there any way that these solar panels are going to create a glare? They looked at the height of the property, and when they testify, they could give in more detail why that isn't possible, given the height of things and where they're positioned.
And going back to the trees, because that's so important in
Sure.
where we live.
Absolutely.
What about, the trees in front, on Springfield Avenue?
I think that's probably best for the landscape architect to speak to
Okay.
where we're replanting, what kind of trees, what the plan is there.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Hi, Nicole DeLauro, DELAURO, 1 Oakley. Just a quick clarification regarding the turning off of the lights.
Sure.
If someone was to be staying overnight in the sanctuary in those rare instances, does that mean that the lights stay on 24/7?
No, it does not.
Okay. Do you know when they would turn off? Would it be the same
Same
ordinance
process,
process?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Carl Carfey, CARFI, 1 Oakley Ave. In your response to Mrs. Carey's prior question, you mentioned that the planting meets the requirements. Are you aware of the zoning requirement of 1 shade tree for every 10 parking spaces?
I believe it's
Yeah,
mentioned, but
in order to maximize the parking as best we can on site, there are no plantings in the parking area itself. But the rest of the landscape plan is quite extensive. It was reviewed by John Linson, who went through all the trees that are going to be taken down and advised on that and approved of the plan. So we will cover the landscape plan in detail. But there's no room to put trees in the middle of that parking lot. It's as constrained as it possibly can be.
Got it. So just to confirm, the planting doesn't actually meet the current zoning requirements, correct?
Not with respect to the parking lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question. Let me see, there's another member of the public, sorry. I just wanted to, go back to the seating for a moment, just because that's something that you had said about your current space, there's a lot of obstructions, right? Whether that's pillars or whatever.
Sure.
And now you're going to have a lot more open viewing. Do you believe that your property will be sought, since you have a lot of time during the week where it's not occupied, where people might come to rent it for, say, lecture space or things like that? Is that part of the plan at all? Or later that will go towards, you have a traffic study, and so I'm just trying to figure out whether that's something that needs to be considered.
If we're renting the property for lecture space?
Lectures, yeah, I mean, if you can seat 300 people, you could, I'm just wondering
Yeah.
whether there's any plan to rent it besides weddings occasionally.
Not rentals, but I could imagine we might have an educational event in the sanctuary in addition to worship, you know, like for our members.
Okay,
That's
Thank you.
possible, or like an annual meeting. Yeah.
thank you.
Bill Hobbs again, H-O-B as in boy, B as in boy, S, excuse me, 21 Beekman Terrace. Your council mentioned the forester's report, and I guess my question is, since the forester recommended you don't cut down the 3 specimen trees in the northwest corner where you're planning to put your trash facility next to the playground in the primary school, would you reconsider saving those 3 trees?
Yeah.
I think the landscape architect should deal with your question. I don't
Okay.
think there's a trash facility in the back of the building.
The northwest corner of the property, according to the staff's comments. Excuse me, you're not the staff.
The trash pickup's actually gonna be at the street, so it'll be moved down there. We don't
Okay.
have a dumpster.
I'll ask the, I guess, the
Yeah,
landscape
there may be
architects
a-
and engineer, okay. Thank you, thank you.
That would be better, thank you.
Justin Lotta, 668 Springfield Avenue. Trying to reconcile in my mind how you, either yourself, your members, or your congregation identify with Summit. Would you say that you or your members of your congregation feel some tie to the Summit community in some way, the history of the town, and maybe just curious if you can answer, you know, in what ways?
Yeah, both the history of the town as well as, you know, personal ties to the community. I mean, we have members who live in Summit and have been members of our community for 50 years and more, so.
Is it important to reflect, and, well, at a minimum, acknowledge, and ideally reflect the sort of history of Summit, the character of Summit that is quite unique to the area and the town?
I think all things are a balance.
So why have you guys chosen to so flagrantly disregard the design guidelines of the town? And the character of the building, the style, just does not fit in Summit. Many would argue, and I know that's a statement, not a question, apologies, but I'm trying to reconcile your identity as being a member of the Summit community and having a tie to the history of Summit, but building a structure that is so flagrantly at odds with that.
So I think history evolves over time, as does architecture.
Okay, so the answer is that you don't. Thank you.
That's not my answer.
Allen Academy, 684 Springfield, Khademi. At one of the neighborhood gatherings, you had indicated to a small group that there would be parking attendants to help to address any spillover parking. If you're at a point where you're reaching capacity of your auditorium with 291 individuals, which I imagine would come to 100-plus cars, and you only have 45 parking spaces, where will these parking attendants be directing parking to?
So I think that the parking expert can speak to exactly what that plan is, probably with more expertise than I can in terms of the ratios and the direction, but I can reaffirm, as I did at that meeting, that we would have parking attendants. We want to be good neighbors, you know. We're going to have folks, that's also why we added the turnaround toward the back of the property in the parking lot to ensure that there's not a backup on the road, for example, just as people are turning into spots.
Understood, but the question was regarding only 45 parking spaces on the lot, which would amount to more than double that if your auditorium started to get to the point of capacity.
Sure, I understand. And I do think that that's a question for the parking expert rather than me, when you're talking about traffic and where people will park.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just a question. You've obviously heard some concern around overnight, any kind of overnight stay.
Sure.
And we've talked about shelter, it's not a shelter, sanctuary. Like, I just want to make sure everyone is asking the right questions or not missing a question. Like, so how do you think about, or I guess, sounds like there's accommodation for one person on the property, maybe 2 because someone else is staying overnight with that person. Is that right?
Yeah, okay.
It's a question. Like,
It would be a member, yeah.
so there'd be accommodation for 2 people max in the plans to be able to stay
Correct.
overnight.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But that member wouldn't necessarily be sleeping, though. That's the point that I'm trying to,
Understood.
yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
Yep.
Raghav Ranganathan. I can spell the last name. It's Renganathan at 690 Springfield Avenue, right across the way. I did receive your flyers and I did attend a couple of your events. How long has the longest resident stayed at your current location in downtown Summit, seeking sanctuary?
I think around a 2-week.
Okay. How did you assess that 291 seats is the right number of seats?
So we looked at, these extraordinary events, but we also, the 291 is seated, it's a seating arrangement facing the pulpit kind of in straight rows. So as I said before, we also wanted a flexible space. That's why we don't have pews, we have chairs, so that if we were able to do worship in the round, which significantly, it takes a lot of the seats away. So that was a factor.
So why not 400 seats? So the
Um,
question.
I don't think we envision needing 400, yeah.
So rather than lead you to more questions,
Okay.
You have a regular capacity requirement of about 160 seats for your Sunday service.
Between the two,
So
yeah.
a total of 160 seats. So even if you used a facility that would allow 200 seats,
Mhm.
you would still be able to operate the facility for the primary use of a single service on Sundays. So why seek all of these variances?
So, as I stated before, there are other events like our Christmas Eve service, which exceed that 160. So that's one. Worship in the round diminishes the number of seats because now you go from a center aisle and 2 side aisles to at least 4 aisles, which just cuts down the amount of space. And then also we do occasionally have memorials, and it has been heartbreaking to have to say to a 50, 60-year member's family that we can't have your memorial here. And that was the upper limit for those memorials.
Okay.
you know.
You are able to accommodate the Christmas service today at your current facility. How
Yeah.
many people attend that now at maximum?
Well, it's smaller since the pandemic, but about across the multiple services we have, when you combine them, I'd have to look back, but I think it's somewhere around 230,
Okay.
220, yeah.
Right. So the opinion and not the question is, you could serve the community.
Questions only.
You could serve the, you could.
Sir, questions only.
Thank you.
So before the next person asks questions, this worship in the round,
Yeah.
like, you turn people away then if you don't have enough seats? If you
Yeah, I
reduce
mean,
the
they wouldn't be
capacity?
able to come in, yeah. I mean, there's nowhere to, if there's nowhere to sit, there's nowhere to sit, right?
Right. Well, would they stand for that?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
Oh,
Sorry, what's your capacity again when it's worship in the round configuration?
it's smaller. It's probably around, I'd have to look back at the exact configurations we did, but we lose somewhere between 2 to 4 rows.
Could you have
of
that number
seating.
for the next meeting?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
how
just-
many times a year do you have worship in the round?
Usually on the bread communion, as I mentioned, the equinox, and one of the solstice services. So
3.
3 to 5, yeah, because there's a fall equinox and a spring.
Your capacity is based on the square footage and so many people per square foot and all that kind of stuff. So even though you may have less seating,
Correct,
the
I
capacity is
understand.
capacity.
Yeah, I understand.
Please.
Hi, Rachel Brennan, 7 Fairview Avenue, Brennan. I wanted to follow up on a comment earlier because I will admit I am confused on some of the terminology between various different overnight stays, or even if not overnight stays, other events going on during the day. So thank you for the clarification. I guess my 2 really hopefully quick questions are, one, there was a comment that, if someone is staying there, there's a member who is staying with that person. I'm just wondering, does that member have to undergo any sort of training or do any sort of preparation, or what is the
Sure.
process for that person, and is it a new person every night? just some background on who that member is.
Yeah, so it's a long-term member who's trained in being a welcoming presence and also understanding, the facility and.
What is trained, what is trained in being a welcoming presence mean?
Like, being able to say, would you like a glass of water? How do you have a blanket? How can I help
But
you?
no
I'm
training
right
in
here.
dealing with someone who is, at whatever the terminology that we're using is, no training in that specific space?
I don't know how to answer the question. I mean, when you're offering sanctuary, you're hosting someone. If we wouldn't host someone who needed medical intervention, if that's what you're asking, because that would be beyond our capacity.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So it's just someone who's there overnight, kind of to just be another presence in the building?
Sure, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then I know we focused a lot about at night, but are there any sort of similar programs during the day that maybe just haven't been on our radar because we've been focusing on the nighttime overnight issue?
No, I mean, as I said, Summit Warm Hearts, the day program is moving to a new location. We have a meditation group during the day. I've listed all of the other daytime programs. So a community group, which is just our small groups of members, 8 to 10, who are meeting. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Please.
Avi Friedman, 34 Hartley Road. Reverend Tanner, I know that you are the mother of young children, and I was just wondering if you have ever felt like your children were in danger as a result of the programming at Beacon Church.
Thank you, Rabbi, for the question. No, not at all. In fact, my children participate in all of our lifespan programs. Since coming to the congregation, our youngest was born and really raised in the midst of the congregation, and I absolutely would not put any of my 5 children in a dangerous situation, which is why we have the safe congregation policy and the protocols that we do have. And in fact, the safety policies of this congregation drew me to bring my family and come to this congregation because they so value the safety of our children and youth.
And I assume you use the same standard with the other children in your congregation?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Nick Ismert, ISMERT from 38 Oakley Avenue. So the parking, it sounds like there's some events where attendance can be above the typical weekly attendance. And in that case, parking could potentially swell beyond the, I think there were 100 as of an estimate. Is that true?
I think on the parking, apologies, this might be frustrating, but I'm still going to refer to Ms.
Okay.
Dolan and the parking study that was
Okay.
done.
And then for I believe from past reports, the city staff has voiced concerns about the parking deficiencies, and the city has a complete streets resolution to make our streets safe not only for cars, but also for pedestrians as well as cyclists. And if the plan for overflow parking is to have everybody park along the shoulder of Springfield Avenue, which happens to be a pretty popular cycling stretch, is there a plan to not conflict with the city resolution on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that really is a question for the parking expert, and you'll get an opportunity to
Okay.
ask
All
that
right,
of her. Thank you.
For clarity,
Yeah.
did you move, your office isn't in the new site? Is that what you were saying?
I have an office at the new site,
So
yeah,
the new
as
site
well
right
as
now
at
is-
Fort Waldron, yeah. That's the only thing that
The only thing there
I
is,
have
right
there.
now is your office?
My office, yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Which we've been we went through the zoning office for. Yeah.
Hi, Christina Kogan, COGAN, 686 Springfield. Hi, Reverend Robin.
Hi.
Just one other question about the
Sure.
community outreach. Can you confirm that the community outreach doesn't have any addiction programs or anything like that in the evening
We don't have any evening programs for addiction.
or daytime or anything
We
with
do host,
addiction?
as is common of many faith communities, we do have a morning AA group that meets once a week.
Mhm.
And that's pretty common throughout faith communities.
I understand. The thing that's
Mhm.
like not sitting well with me is the primary center and having
It's not a question.
AA. I know it's not a
Questions?
question, I'm
Thank you.
sorry, but is there anything about that that we can have where it's
Yeah, so
not during the hours with children around?
So Chrissy, I really appreciate the question. Our AA group does not meet during school hours and
Okay.
does not meet during the week, so in answer to that question. But the other thing I would say is throughout this evening, there has been a lot of fear about, it lifted up about people who are unhoused, who have addictions, who are food insecure, who are vulnerable and at risk.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, the core of what a faith community does, most if not all of our faith communities, is to provide for individuals who are vulnerable and at risk. And to provide, that is a core, I mean, that's why our sanctuaries are called sanctuaries.
Right.
And
I
the
think
other
it's
thing
just
I will
not right
say,
behind a school, though.
well,
primary
Chrissy,
center.
here's the piece of what I want to say. Many of our faith communities that in fact actually have preschools housed in them also provide these other ministries. And I would say individuals with addiction, recovering alcoholics, they are in our school systems. They are our family members. They are our community members and our residents. So painting, there's a certain amount where these individuals are being painted as if they're these terrifying individuals coming in to kidnap children. And we have lots of recovering alcoholics, some of whom may even be in this room. And I think it's very dangerous. I just, as a minister with a moral fabric, I can't sit here and not say that it's okay to attack the character of someone who's trying to be sober and stay sober and goes to a small weekly meeting to maintain their sobriety. I think that's something we should praise and support.
And I do respect that. It's a playground that's right there.
Questions
Kids
only,
playing.
please.
Yeah, sorry. I'll just leave it at that.
My experience of recovering alcoholics is that they're not going to playgrounds and trying to harm children. And I actually find that offensive.
Hi, Erwin Miller, 5 Knophill Drive. Are you familiar with what happened at Maybe Playground last week where a homeless individual was accused of accosting 2 young children and trying to take them?
I just
and was drunk and was arrested and pulled away from that. So,
As they should have been arrested, absolutely. But there are also, sir, many individuals we know. Unfortunately, it's a horrible thing to say out loud and no one wants to admit it. The vast majority of people who abuse children are known to those children. So if we're really wanting to talk about reality and the statistics, let's talk about reality and the statistics.
we can certainly address that. My question is around creating incentives to have outside people who are not from Summit come to Summit, provide them incentives to come to Summit, and then house that facility next to a primary center.
Is
that the best place to put that kind of facility or provide those services?
We are not doing that. I've clearly said we're not having a drop-in
Hasn't
center.
been so clear, actually.
Well, I apologize, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Raghav Ranganathan, RANGANATHAN, 690 Springfield Avenue. Hello again. It has been confusing to understand the difference between shelter and sanctuary.
Sure.
There was a comment made by the council earlier that there can be a conditional approval to prevent the facility being used as a shelter. Would that also apply to anyone seeking overnight sanctuary?
I don't know the legal answer to that.
Well, that's not what we suggested. We certainly suggested we have no plans or facility for an ongoing shelter, and we would certainly agree to that in writing. Sanctuary is a different story because it's, as you've heard, pretty rare. It's very limited in time and scope, and it's also very limited in occurrence. If it's happened once a year, statistically over the last number of years, then it's a different function.
All right, so.
And it's a traditional church function, and I think that it's the kind of thing that the zoning board probably should not be regulating, frankly. But we would think that we, as a church, it's something we ought to be able to continue to do. And I think it's been described in detail in terms of the controls around it, its limited nature, the fact that another church member is staying with this person, and that it's not something that's occurring on a weekly or even monthly basis.
All right. Would you be okay to ensure that the cameras have a remote monitor to say that if someone's coming in and trying to stay overnight in a automobile, that you can report someone coming there to the authorities saying that, hey, someone's parked overnight?
So all of our cameras, at least most security systems that I'm aware of in our current security system, have cloud software which makes them remotely accessible, and you can set up different kinds of warnings.
Okay, to notify the authorities in case, so that way you would.
Or in case of a break-in or any number of situations when no one is at the building.
Okay, and so that would be your plan for security, which is the overnight.
When no one's in the building, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
John Burke, 29 Fairview Ave. A couple clarifying questions, because I don't want to get might be some confusion in the room based on the semantics of how some of these questions are being asked and answered. What is, outside of regular Sunday service, what is the frequency of activities at the church where there are more than 25 attendees?
I'm checking the schedule.
Mr. Ball, will A1 be attached to the public forum? And if so, Nicole, when would that go up?
I'm not in charge of that, so I can't tell you the answer on that one.
So
But I would
It
assume
certainly can be, and
hopefully soon.
relatively soon. is
So
the answer.
So outside of Sundays, it looks, reviewing the calendar, which we did to do this over a period of years, and excluding COVID, because we didn't want to falsely reduce the numbers. It looks like we're talking about a memorial, a wedding, or a child dedication once every, say, 12 weeks on a Saturday. And that's it. I mean, the support group also meets right now on Saturday mornings, the AA group, but they don't exceed 25 individuals on
Okay.
the regular, yeah.
And then my second question is, and without labeling it as a specific program like Warm Hearts or anything else, what services does the church provide, or does the church plan to provide at the proposed location for unhoused or otherwise homeless individuals?
At present, aside from that sanctuary, which is a really limited function, about once a year, at most, we don't have
So
a
nothing
provision for that.
outside of that?
No.
No
At the
engagement
present moment.
with unhoused or homeless individuals on the property at any time?
Can I tell you
outside
someone
of
will
that?
never come to a Sunday service who's unhoused looking for resources? No, our services are public and open to the community. And then we do the compassionate kind thing that many of our faith communities in Summit do, which is to, get them connected to a case manager or call the non-emergency number to get them support. That does happen, but not with frequency, so.
So no one will be showering, for example, at the facility?
On the regular? No,
Yeah.
as a
Or
program.
at all?
We may have a shower on site.
To be used by
A
homeless or
hosted-
unhoused individuals?
No, that's not the plan for it.
So it will not be used for that purpose?
That is not the intent, no.
It will not be used for that purpose?
I think I'm answering your question.
No,
The
you're
answer is
saying it's
no.
not the intent, which is different.
So the answer is no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hillary Academy, 684 Springfield. I just had a quick question about the use of the outdoor space. I know that you
Sure.
wanted this property so that you could have more nature and
Mhm.
so I would assume that there might be more plans to be doing more outdoor activities. I know you, is that something that you guys are hoping to explore?
Well, the labyrinth, walking
Can you
the
explain
labyrinth.
what that actually?
The
I mean, I know
labyrinth
what it
is-
looks like because I see it.
Yeah, so it's a patterned, it's a technique in meditation. It's essentially a walking meditation is how you can think about it.
So do people come regularly? Is there like a group meditation that happens? Like, I'm just trying to get a
You
sense
can
of,
do
like,
it as a small group, but really, it's usually one person at a time that would be using the labyrinth and
But like who, like just
a
the
member.
members just
Yeah, a
come
member of the
whenever they
community.
like and just use it? Is that, I'm just.
I mean, during daylight hours, because it's, outside.
And
but-
is there other plans for like people just to be coming in and out during the day to be using the facilities?
That's all included in this
I'm sorry, I
document,
didn't
like
read all that.
no, I understand, but like we have a small meditation group that meets indoors. If you're asking about outside on Sundays, we might take some of the children out to do a lesson on the property because
Okay.
that has to do with the children's program. We have an Easter egg hunt that's once a year outside on our property.
It just seemed like that was a priority to have all this open, natural space. So I'm just curious, there has
Yeah.
to be other plans maybe that you might want to use it for, or?
As I've said, meditation, prayer, small social gatherings for our children. There's a memorial garden space, so a time for people to, remember loved ones.
And you wouldn't be planning to like rent out that space, putting tents up
No,
in case
no,
someone
no.
wanted to have an outdoor wedding or something like that?
No, there's no plan to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Gorka Sarasa, SARASA, 37 Oakley Avenue. So regarding your intents, not plannings, I was checking the Morristown. They make like 64 events per month. What if you plan later, organize a big number of events like 60, because the congregation is similar size?
Do you mean the
Do we-
Morristown Unitarian Fellowship?
Yes.
Okay.
So what if you say, oh, now let's plan for the Beacon community to have more and more and more and more? Does the community of Summit has a say on that? Or will have a say on that?
Well, we would have to comply within our use and anything outdoors. It's not like we can have a big concert. There's noise
I'm
rules.
talking
and-
inside, like in the building, all these meeting rooms that you have.
I've already detailed our plans. I mean, there's not a secret plan to have a large
Yeah, but
inside
I'm saying like,
event.
what in the case that you start organizing more and more, for example, like in the Morristown one?
I
do we
can't
have a
speak
say?
on the Morristown programming. I'm not familiar with it
So they have 64
extensively.
activities. They have a schedule
Uh-huh.
like yours. It has 64 activities.
Right, but
So what if you reach
again,
that point? Will you consult the Summit community or will you just organize yourself?
well, one thing I've said is we'll continue to open meetings with our neighbors, including the Wilson Primary Center, and be in good conversation. And so if there was a problem, of course, we would want to work to resolve that. But no, we're not intending to have this growth pattern. That's what I've already testified to.
I know you don't intend, but what if it happens?
I mean, there's a lot of what ifs, and I don't know how to speculate on every potential scenario that could occur at a future date. Especially after living through this pandemic and trying to do ministry in that, I'm not going to speculate on the what ifs. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. The A1 exhibit that you gave us, this
Sure.
is current or like past?
It's the average of the last year.
Okay.
And then with the weddings and memorials, we looked over several years to get an accurate number. And I did exclude 2020, obviously, because, that would have brought all of the numbers down.
So with your plans for your new facility, is there an updated, is your weekly schedule planning to stay the same? Or I
Yeah.
would think,
Yeah, with the exception of Sunday, of course, coming down. And I've noted in this schedule, for example, like note this, for Warm Hearts, there's a note there. It says, note this ends April 1st, 2025. The program is moving to a new location. So where a program wouldn't be applicable at the new location, I've designated
so
that.
those are the only two things that you're anticipating that are going to change going forward from this schedule? Is Warm Hearts is no longer be around, and you're only going to have one service on Sunday? There's nothing else? I mean, you talked about some other things that, activities that you want to do
But
that
they're
you'll be able to.
included in this programming. So for example, instead of our children's programming being all inside, right? Still the same number of children, but we would be able to do some of those lesson plans outside. So that's the
Okay, so
difference,
it's-
but
this
it
is-
doesn't.
So this is inclusive of every program? that you have planned?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So just for the benefit of the public that, who doesn't have this, just approximately, just because of the question about the number
Sure.
in Morristown, not including Warm Hearts, it's probably less than 20 activities that are on the calendar per week, counting
Correct.
coffee
Yeah.
hour as a distinct activity, youth leadership meetings, something in that range.
Right.
And this will be posted, but just to get, because no one has this.
Yeah.
What I can do is I can send this electronically to Chris, I guess tomorrow, Nicole, because we've used Chris to put things up. So if you want me to do that, that's
Yes,
probably the
please.
simplest thing.
Thank you,
And
Roger.
then he can put it right on the website, so.
That'd be great. Thanks. Yes.
Hi, David Warren, Warren, 76 Beekman. Just regarding the Warm Hearts program that's moving off-site, have you identified those sites? They're confirmed, and where are they?
They are, but I don't want to get ahead of our community partners in announcing that. I'm happy at our next meeting, we can confirm it, but I don't want to get ahead of telling their volunteers.
But it's
and-
been accepted, like
Yes,
confirmed?
yeah.
Okay. And on the site itself, and I apologize if I didn't notice it closely enough on the plans, is there any type of physical barrier at all, a fence, a gate of any kind between the property and the baseball field, the Wilson Park?
No.
At all?
No.
Okay. And sorry, last question. You mentioned that you communicated with the principal
Mhm.
at Wilson. Were there any concerns expressed by the principal, or they're worth noting to the public?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Based on what one of the residents asked this question before, is there anybody showering now at the one on Waldron?
There is through the Warm Hearts program, yeah, which is the program that is moving. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And occasionally, it's rare, but it happens that somebody, like a child gets sick or something like that, but that's pretty rare.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because I disagree with it's rare, because I've spoken to a couple of these people,
Mhm.
and they regularly shower at.
Oh, as part of the Warm Hearts program, I don't contest that at all. I'm saying outside of that program, no, and that program is moving. Yeah.
Please.
Frankie Deegan, Degen, 6 Beekman Terrace. So you keep mentioning that's not your intention. Warm Hearts is now leaving, you're saying? Can
Yes.
it come back?
No, I don't think it would. at
It
our-
could never, ever come back?
Not to our new location.
Ever? You're guaranteeing that? I'm just asking, because once you're there, there's nothing we can do about it. So if
I understand.
6 months from now,
Yeah.
they could come back?
No, I mean, we don't have the same fellowship space that we have at our current facility.
But you were saying with your space that it's
Yeah.
movable chairs. So right now on your website,
But we wouldn't have meals in the sanctuary.
okay, you're saying you wouldn't, but
Okay.
if you left and someone else comes in and they want to do it,
It would be up to the board and,
but it would be up to the board of the church,
correct.
not up to any of us.
I understand your question.
So you mentioned that you don't hold weddings other than, but you just mentioned that all those chairs are movable. So now you have a big open space.
We've already discussed a condition.
Yeah.
Council, correct me if I'm wrong. The applicants will not operate a homeless shelter facility on the
Correct.
site.
But not even homeless, just bringing them in during the day. Because right now,
It's the same.
the Warm Hearts, I understand, is leaving.
Encompass in the term shelter.
And I think we can work with the language to make sure it does.
Right, agreed.
Right, but Warm Hearts could come back possibly.
Not if we
Or-
have this condition in place.
So we could put that in, we can put in that if the weddings, they can move the chairs, then there's a big open space. Because on the website, it does say you have rentals. You can rent it out for things.
I have said that we will have occasional weddings.
Right,
I don't
but
know
when
how
you say
limit a
weddings,
fee.
you're saying the service. I'm asking if the chairs all get moved, now you have a space to do
No.
a reception. But there's all these things that could happen later. So once this is in with this massive structure, we have no say after it, once it's here.
What is
So-
your question?
How do we prevent what our fears are? Because you're saying we're not planning on it.
So there's any number of fears that we've given answer to. There are things you may be afraid of that,
It's not,
There's-
I mean,
you know,
I mean.
I don't know
you're
how to
near-
assuage
I
your
think the
fear
biggest
of
thing is the
weddings.
primary center, because all these things could affect these children.
I understand that. I'm a mother. I get it. I do. And I can assure you, we will not do anything to endanger children.
I wouldn't think you would. I actually agree with a lot of the stuff you do. The problem is where you're locating this church is the issue for most of us.
But I'm telling you, on that property, we have children. We have, so I
On
wouldn't.
the weekend, yes, but during the week when,
But I come
Warm
into the
Hearts.
office and.
no, I know,
and my
but Warm
children are
Hearts,
with
we've had
me.
issues with on Waldron, I mean, we know this, we're all aware of it.
I understand.
So now you're putting that next to a primary, and I know they're leaving, but they can come back, correct?
No,
Ever.
we've just
We've
answered
just
that
said
question.
All
three
right.
times. It's going to be conditioned, so they cannot. It's a condition
And all
of
the other things we
resolution.
can add conditions into.
What's that?
We can add other conditions in as well.
The applicants can agree to any limitations on the application.
Okay, thank you.
Carl Carfey, CARFI, 1 Oakley Ave. One final question, and thank you for your patience with my prior questions. Would you agree that the request for 18 variances, especially for things like building and lot coverage and yard buffers and setbacks, raises concern about whether your proposed church can truly be integrated into this residential community without negatively impacting the character of the neighborhood?
I would not agree with that, no.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the public? All right. Seeing the lateness of the hour, I don't know that it's going to make a lot of sense to continue with your next witness.
I don't think it makes any sense to start, Mr. Chairman, at this
Yes.
point, because the next witness is the architect. There'll
And we're
be-
going to want to give him
there'll
some
be
time.
At least 2 or 3 questions for him, I should think. So I would think if we start fresh, that might be a good idea.
Okay, and I'm going to ask the public, not mandate this, but sincerely request that please try and group your questions together. I understand that in the course of witnesses' testimony, that a future question may arise, but I think in our effort to try and expedite this, but also hear everyone and give them equal time, next time we come back, please try and keep that in mind, that you get all your questions together and try and ask them at one time, if possible. Thank you.
So it looks like the next date we had scheduled for this would be April 7th.
April 7th?
And, council, I imagine waiving timeframe to act. I don't know if we're even there yet, but
Absolutely.
thank you.
How's our team on April 7th? We good? Okay. That works. Thank you.
So I'm guessing we'll be looking for a motion to carry. Given the quick turnaround, I imagine it's without further notice.
Yes.
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Nicole? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Malay? Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Feskins?
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli?
Yes.
Mr. Nearing?
Yes.
Chairman Lucas?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Zahn?
Yes.
I have a question. For April 7th, is this the only thing on the agenda? Do you know? No? Okay. So there'll be other ones.
I think 144 Beekman's also on.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. See
You
you
wanna
in
keep that for
April
later?
7th. Nicole, we have resolutions,
Things we have to
right?
vote on today, right?
Sorry, we have more business to conduct, if you guys can keep it down a little bit.
All right, people, we need to take the conversations outside. The board still has business to complete tonight.
Thank you.
We ate it all down here, Nicole. We have one piece left.
Good.
I'm keeping this one.
I told you guys would eat it.
I brushed my teeth before I
Can we go, guys?
so I can go right to bed when I get home.
Yeah.
Can we,
What kind of gummies are we talking about?
It takes me 2 hours to decompress after this.
all right, all right, I really don't want to stay any longer.
I know.
Come on, guys, quiet, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. All right, we have 2 resolutions, guys. Nicole, you want to read us through?
Just voting?
No, just tell us what they are and then the eligible members.
So we have Oak Knoll School. This is zoning board application 24-2234 for 44 Blackburn Road and 72 Prospect Avenue. The members that are allowed to vote on this are Chairman Loikis, Vice Chair Zahn, Mr. Steiner, who is not here, Mr. Yuko, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Kieran, and Ms. Chifo.
Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Kieran,
Yes.
Ms. Chifo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Zahn,
Yes.
Chairman Loikis.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have John and Elizabeth Cully. This is 162 Oak Ridge Avenue, zoning board application 24-2268. The members that are able to vote on this is the exact same. So if you don't mind, I will just call a roll.
Yep.
Mr. Yuko?
Wait, we need a motion to approve.
Oh, yeah.
Make a motion. Second.
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Kieran?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Vice Chair Zahn?
Yes.
Chairman Loikis?
Yes. All right, great. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
No, let's stay longer. So moved.
Second.
Great.
Perfect.
All in favor?
Aye.